Trixie was called out by the girl and told that His Majesty was ready and should be hurried to him. Trixie was very happy about this. She wanted to see her pout make his public debut as soon as possible. The crown prince of the Atata Empire was nicknamed the Wild Prince. The guy was truly the epitome of the word wild, but with Trixie's help, he had been successfully humanized, and finally, the day had come. Today was the historic day of his debut as Prince Charming. Trixie ran out from around the corner and shouted to Leone. The prince was overjoyed that Trixie had come to see him. The girl looked at the guy and couldn't believe that her soulmate was once a meal on all fours with disheveled hair. Trixie started telling the guy about how incredible he looked. The boy couldn't believe if it was true. He felt kind of uncomfortable. Trixie had told the prince that he would get used to such clothes in a matter of days. The girl immediately remembered her shock when she first saw Leone on all fours, as he had changed dramatically. Trixie didn't think there was anything she could do to help anymore. The girl tried not to cry on such a solemn day. Afterward, Trixie stretched out her hand and looked at the guy. The prince knelt down and gave the girl his hand. He talked about how he never thought before that walking on his feet like other people was so comfortable. Leone was happy that now he could hold the girl's hand, walk with her, and even hug her. And afterward, the prince began to tell the girl that now he could verbally declare that the guy was yours. Trixie couldn't understand in what sense he was hers. After all, the guy wasn't some dog. The prince was telling the girl that anyway, she didn't have to do anything for him now, and from now on, the guy would do everything for the girl. Leone was telling the girl about how she was his one and only. Trixie was realizing something, that the puppy she used to know was like vaporized today. At some point, Trixie remembered the time period. The girl was walking the dog as afterward it broke free from the leash and ran away. The girl was yelling to the dog that it was dangerous and it should be a good girl and listen to its owner. After a while, the girl was already holding the leash and was happy that the dog was caught. The owner was so engrossed in her pet that she did not notice how she found herself on the road. And afterward, something strange happened. The girl looked at the headlights from the car. The owner hugged the dog, and after that, they were hit by a car. After a while, Trixie woke up abruptly. She began to call her dog Doc Sung. The girl had no way of realizing where she was now. Trixie sat in the room and talked about how this place didn't look like a hospital, and she didn't understand what it was and where she was now. Behind the door, someone started telling Trixie to get up now, and then the door opened. The girl didn't understand what was going on or why these people were dressed like that. Trixie got up from the bed, apologized, and said that she was hit by a car, and after that, she woke up here. Afterward, the girl started asking if anyone had seen her dog. Trixie described her dog, saying his name was Doc Sung, and she's a big dog with the heart of a puppy. The man who stood looking at Trixie began to talk about what kind of dog and whether the girl was crazy. The man began to say that he should have made such a conclusion earlier, when Trixie was going to marry that commoner. The girl stood there not understanding what the wedding was about, or what was even going on. After a while, the man talked about how the groom had already come for the girl, and Trixie could leave with him and starve to death. The man wouldn't care about that. And afterward, the man started telling the girl that she was no longer their daughter. The mother, listening to all this, was crying and couldn't believe her father's words. Trixie asked to wait for her parents, because she had to explain what was going on. Trixie asked her parents not to leave without telling her anything, but the girl didn't listen. After a while, Trixie was already looking at her hands. She couldn't understand why they were so pale. Trixie realized that something was wrong. She didn't want to think about the fact that after the accident, her eyesight had been affected. Trixie didn't understand what was wrong with Doc Sung if the girl herself was in such a state. As soon as Trixie looked at herself in the mirror, she had no way of knowing who she was or where 31-year-old Lim Bobe had gone. After a while, a man stopped by Trixie's house and called the girl his love. The man talked about how he was the girl's precious fiancé and he had come for her. He called Trixie a naughty girl and asked her about the girl already waiting for him in her nightie. Trixie looked at the man and didn't realize what kind of uncle he was. Meanwhile, the girl's husband came up behind her and started talking about how they would always be together and nothing could stop them as long as their love burned with a fiery passion. Trixie started yelling at the man, and asking him why he was groping her. The man asked the girl why she was playing hard to get, if she was actually enjoying all of this. The man was happy that the girl had chosen her one and only, despite the objections of her family. The husband first called the girl Beatrice Giuseppe, and then said that he took back his words, and since they had already made marriage vows to each other, he would call the girl Beatrice Vatin. The girl could not understand what kind of Beatrice Giuseppe was. In the short story, The Margrave's Marriage Contract, the girl was called Trixie. Everywhere from her debut to small tea parties, there were so many rumours about the girl that she ended up making inappropriate remarks and betraying people. Trixie even got involved in a scandalous relationship with a commoner and was rejected by her family. The problem is that the girl who became Trixie never read the novel to the end, so the girl has no idea how the plot will develop further. The girl only remembers that the character Trixie drove the girl mad, and now she became this Beatrice herself. It was even hard to call her a cool main character. Rather, she was a secondary character who ruined her life. The girl's husband talked about how she knew he had nothing, but Beatrice was all the guy needed. He talked about how there was nothing precious to their love. Other people's stories usually start differently. They find themselves in the body of a lady from a luxurious home, looking for love, meaning, and success. Beatrice's husband said that now that they had gotten rid of all those who stood in the way of their love, they were left with only a lifetime of happiness. In any case, the girl realized that she seemed to have found herself in the body of the worst hero in history. A year and a half had already passed since she had been expelled from the family and married to James. There was no love in this family as such. The girl was yelling at her husband and telling him that he didn't even have the energy to find a normal job. James was constantly yelling at the girl. Beatrice tolerated all this. She realized that she had to bitch, and after she saved enough money, she would turn this house upside down and leave. The nice man who swore he needed nothing but love was gone in just a day. James yelled at the girl and asked her how she couldn't make him a gift for their anniversary. The girl's family had rejected her. Beatrice didn't understand how she could afford to buy a gift. That scumbag, Jamie, only married the girl because of the wealth of the girl's family, but when he found out that the girl was driven away penniless, his attitude changed immediately. The girl tried to return to Giuseppe's house and begged for forgiveness, but in response received only cold denial, which made things worse. The world of this novel is very conservative. For this reason, divorces as such do not exist here. Naturally, when people get tired of their spouses, they just start cheating. But isn't cheating worse than divorce? After a while, James told Beatrice to be a substitute for his dear Joan. Her husband told the girl that they needed a servant, and this was just the job for the girl. James said that since the girl could not entertain him, she could earn some money. Then Beatrice would be of some use. If Beatrice got it right, Joan is a pub worker that Jamie has been seeing a lot of lately. Before, the guy wouldn't let the girl work because he thought the girl would run away with the money. Beatrice wondered what had changed. James asked the girl if she knew about the foot of Mount Mito. It is a harsh place where many people die every year. The boy on could send his dear Joan to this place. That's why James told the girl about going in there and dying. Beatrice was angry because this freak doesn't even try to hide his thoughts. The girl couldn't stand it anymore. After a while, the guy called out to the girl and told about people offering 10 gold coins to anyone who can get out of there alive. Beatrice was shocked by the money, because in this world a gold coin cost 100 hoses, but 10 gold pieces was something exorbitant. With such money, the girl could go anywhere and not live with Jamie anymore. Besides, the girl noted that she would do a good job as a servant, and she would finally be able to get out of this pigsty. The next morning, the girl got ready to go. She got into the carriage, took all the things she needed, and drove off. Beatrice noted that she had never seen such a luxurious carriage before. She didn't understand why she was being taken in such a beautiful wagon, because she thought they were travelling to the rugged foothills of a mountain. The girl decided that the best way would be to ask the people her way, and if they were going in the right direction. Beatrice looked out of the carriage window and asked a young man if they were definitely going to the foot of Mito Mountain. The guy looked at the girl angrily and asked her where else they could go. Beatrice looked at the guy. He was very intimidating, and the girl decided to ask him nothing more and just keep quiet. The girl decided that the other people might have changed their minds because of this taciturn guy. After a while, the guy told the girl that they were in place and she could come out. Beatrice saw a huge mansion. She didn't understand why he was standing here because it was a dangerous place for him. The guy walked up to the girl and handed her some clothes. Beatrice started to ask him what it was and if it was a uniform. The guy said it wasn't and it was for the girl's protection. The guy asked Beatrice to keep that uniform on if she didn't want to lose a limb, and the guy also added to the girl and told her not to walk ahead of him. Beatrice didn't know what the guy was talking about or what they were making the servants do here. Suddenly, someone shouted from the castle about a young monster. The boy didn't like that and asked to himself if he was missing again. The guy talked about how they were relaxed because he had taken his meds an hour ago, but when they checked the cage, it was empty. The guy talked about how he couldn't go far and they needed to check the mountain, so he ordered the girl to go to the hallway, deadbolt the door and wait there quietly. Beatrice thought she had heard it all. She wanted to be alone. The guy was telling the girl not to go outside, whatever she heard. Beatrice couldn't understand what was going on at all. All the people were wearing the same leather cloaks, and no one could figure out what was going on, whether some wild animal had escaped or something else. The girl realized that she had to know inside like she said she did. The entire mansion had 8 locks on the entrance. It would take all day to lock that door. As soon as the girl entered the mansion, she saw how dusty it was, and the outside looked better. The interior was many times worse. Beatrice thought about how they were actually keeping a wild animal in this mansion. After a while, the girl decided to sit down in a chair. Beatrice did not manage to relax, as she started to hear the sounds of some animal. Afterwards, some guy on all fours ran towards the girl. His face was filled with anger. Beatrice didn't understand who he was. She didn't know what kind of person he was, if he could be called that. The guy looked like a human, but yet seems like some kind of beast. Especially the guy had a growl. The girl didn't run away from the guy and talked about being a new servant. The guy couldn't even talk normally. The girl asked the guy to calm down and not to grind his teeth, but the guy didn't listen to the girl and came closer to her. Beatrice didn't understand what to do because she needed to get out of this place somehow. But the problem was that the door was locked and with 8 different locks. She realized that she had to get out of here. Beatrice hoped that someone would come to help her if she banged on the door like a madwoman. The girl decided that she needed to count to 3 and run to the door. Beatrice wanted to start running, but suddenly a guy came up to the girl and pressed himself against her with all his might. Beatrice could not understand what was going on, and the girl realized that this was her chance to run. As soon as the girl decided to go to the exit, she heard how the guy began to make screams and moans. Beatrice decided not to run away, and then ran up to the guy. She sat down to ask him if he was hurt or not. The guy didn't answer anything. Then Beatrice looked at him and asked him what was wrong with him and if he could hear the girl. The guy was on all fours and growled. As soon as Beatrice heard the guy growl, she recognized him as her dog, Doc Sung. The girl's dog made the same sounds when he wanted attention. The girl remembered how Doc Sung was at the veterinary clinic and was getting an injection. The dog was being mean, and the girl was telling Doc Sung that everything was fine last time and the dog should stop being mean. Beatrice started to look into the guy's eyes and realized that they looked the same as the dog's. Doc Seong had been returned to the orphanage 3 times for her antics, but she was the only one who was always by the girl's side. This man reminded Beatrice so much of Doc Seong, so the girl realized that there was no point in running to the exit. Beatrice started to ask the guy if he was all right. The girl wanted him to let her look at him. Beatrice remembered that Doc Seong was also afraid of her at first, so the girl let her sniff her hand. The girl thought it was worth trying to do that. Beatrice realized that when she began to perceive the guy as Doc Sung, she wasn't scared at all. After that, the next step should have begun, but things didn't go according to plan. The guy started growling at the girl. Beatrice started yelling at the guy and talking about how he was a bad boy. The girl said that he was a bad dog and he should not raise his voice and attack her. As soon as Beatrice said this to the boy, he looked at the girl with surprised eyes and started listening attentively. The girl realized that everything worked perfectly. Beatrice looked at the boy and told him not to worry, for the girl was not a bad person at all. And then she offered the dog to sniff her hand. The boy sniffed the girl's hand and turned away. Beatrice started talking about how he was a good boy, and everything was fine. She talked about how she wouldn't hurt the boy and now everything would be okay, and afterwards she hugged him. The girl asked the dog about something that he himself was scared of. The boy tried to say something but kept silent, and afterwards he just snuggled into the girl's hand. Beatrice was glad she had done that, and she was actually doing well. The girl was yelling to Doc Sung about her big sis doing it. The cloaked men were talking about how they needed to request for backup and keep searching. After a while, a guy in a beautiful purple cape came into the castle. He saw the dog lying on Beatrice's legs and asked her what she had done and how it had turned out. The girl immediately started yelling to the guy not to yell because the baby was sleeping and he might wake him up with his screams. The guy had no way of understanding what the baby was and why the girl wasn't hurt yet. The guy started telling the girl that it was dangerous in this place and they should talk outside, and then he ordered the girl to follow him. As soon as the guy went outside with Beatrice, he immediately started asking her who this person was and what organization had sent the girl. Beatrice did not understand what kind of organization and said that she came here to work as a servant. The guy said that he understood everything, and the girl was here on a secret case. He immediately started asking her if she was a spy or not. The girl didn't know how to react to that. Then the guy started telling her that if she wasn't a spy, she was probably an assassin. It seemed to the girl that it was a little early for such trouble. Beatrice was swearing at the guy and telling him that first she was a spy, then the guy calls her an assassin. She couldn't understand what he was even talking about. The guy started asking the girl who this man was and who sent her, if it was the Great Duke. The guy started telling Beatrice that according to the laws of the Empire, she would make sure that she would be executed immediately. Beatrice asked the guy if he was okay and if he could think with his head for a second, because if the girl were a killer, she could have killed the guy and escaped unnoticed. The girl asked the guy that if she were a murderer, would she be hanging around here? The guy thought about it for a while and decided that the girl was right. Besides, he didn't notice any hostility in the girl, and there were no weapons either. The guy decided to ask the girl about the fact that then she actually met him face to face, and yet remained unharmed, and then he also fell asleep in her arms without falling. Beatrice talked about him trying to hurt her, but he had been in a sorry state even before she arrived. The guy understood what it meant. The medicine only then worked, but she still had doubts about her. But if the girl could really take care of Master Leon, it would be very good indeed. Beatrice talked about that was what she wanted to say. After all, you can't accuse people without hearing them out. And afterwards, the guy told the girl about following him, and they will continue the conversation in the office. Beatrice followed the guy and asked him to wait for her, but the guy didn't listen to her at all. After a while, the girl came to the study. The guy started talking to Beatrice about taking a seat. After a while, the guy was already talking about how they were running out of time, and they would start with the contract. The girl didn't understand what the contract was, because the guy hadn't tried to throw her out. The guy said that just in case they would look into who she was, and if anything suspicious came up, the girl would be dealt with according to the contract. The guy told the girl to mean it. Beatrice began to ask about what this contract, the non-disclosure agreement, was turning out to be. The girl read this contract. It stated that she was forbidden to talk about what she saw in the mansion. If the information leaked, the girl, her family, and the next 3 generations would be punished. Beatrice realized that the young master whom she must serve is this man. The guy told the girl about the right thing to do. Beatrice started asking the guy about why this young man was making animal noises, and more importantly, why he was just being addressed as a young master. The girl started asking the guy about maybe she needed to know his name or title. The guy was telling the girl that they couldn't inform the girl of anything until she signed the contract. The guy could only say one thing. That is, that everyone who is in the mansion serves the young master, and as Beatrice had come to notice, the young master tends to attack people, so all the servants live in the annex. Beatrice's role, however, is to be his personal servant, so the girl would stay with him in the main building. Beatrice started talking about how she now understood why the salary was so high. The guy was telling the girl that they were willing to pay more than 10 gold pieces if the girl wanted. Beatrice was shocked at such a lot of money. The guy was answering the girl about Beatrice's salary being able to increase at her discretion, depending on the length of her stay here. Of course, bonuses would be paid separately. The girl was shocked that she would be paid 10 gold pieces a day, with bonuses. Beatrice realized that she had been taking care of Dokseong for 10 years, so it was worth a try. Beatrice started asking the guy how much they were willing to raise the salary. The guy answered the girl about as much as the girl wanted, as long as Beatrice could stay in the place, and they also had to give the girl a private room. Beatrice couldn't believe that a servant was being given a private room. The girl could not believe what was happening. She started asking about the fact that if she signed it, she would be put into a carriage and sold as a slave. The guy asked the girl about why they would do such an unfortunate thing. Besides, it's not good for the emotional health of the young master. The girl realized that this job paid 10 gold pieces a day, and especially in the position of a girl, she could not afford to hesitate. After a while, Beatrice said that she agreed, and she would do her best to serve the guy. The guy told the girl that it was good, and afterwards gave the paper. The girl began to ask the guy what it was. Then the guy started to answer that it was an agreement to pay her family 1,000 gold if Beatrice died at the hands of the young master. If the girl was married, her spouse would get the compensation. Beatrice was not happy that if something happened to her, they would give 1,000 gold to her spouse, who belongs in the deepest corner of hell. The girl asked the guy to burn that sheet right in front of her now. The guy asked the girl about maybe wishing for something else. The girl thought about what she could wish for. She thought that maybe her to go back to her world and reunite with Daeok Sung, or maybe divorce freak Jamie, but none of those things were possible. Then the girl began to think of things to wish for. Beatrice wished for her private house. The guy told her well, and if she would manage her obligations for a year, she would get a house in the capital. Beatrice couldn't believe her eyes, because a house in the capital is a fortune. However, the guy added that for a year of labor she would only be able to live there for free. The guy replied that for the house to be all girl, she had to work here for 3 years. For the girl, 3 years was nothing. It would be the happiest 3 years of her life. Beatrice shouted with a smile on her face that she would sign the contract. Thanks to this signature, a bright future awaited her after 3 years, and after that the girl was already signing the contract. Beatrice began to ask what the guy's name was. Then, he, despite the girl's eyes, answered that his name is Adler Vikingham, and for short, you can just Adler. Adler Vikingham is one of the main secondary characters of the novella and the strongest knight of the Atata Empire. As the Emperor's right-hand man, he is given the most important task, which is to serve the only prince of the empire. The girl realized that Adler serves no one but the imperial family, but he serves her employer, the young master. The girl understood what it turns out. The employer is a single mad prince of the Leone Atata Empire. The girl didn't understand how it could have worked out there. In the novella, The Margrave's Marriage Contract, Leone was described as a prince with an unstable mind, which is why the emperor tried to hide his existence. As a result, Leone barely appeared in the novella. More precisely, he was one of the reasons why the empire was turning into ruins. The empress gave birth to Leone and died soon after, but since the emperor was unwilling to get a new empress, Leone was the sole successor to the throne. One of the people was talking to Grand Duke Evans about being of imperial blood, wasn't he? Someone was asking the Duke about whether he would actually stand idly by while this idiot prince takes the throne. The Duke replied with a smile on his face about this throne being his. As a descendant of the imperial family, Grand Duke Evans had tried to kill Leone many times. Although the imperial family hid the existence of the princess, they did nothing to directly stop Duke Evans' attempts to kill the prince. Therefore, the Atata Empire had many uncontrollable entities, causing it to become nothing like an empire at all. And then 2 brave heroes appeared to save the dying nation. They were the female and male protagonists of the novella. With all this in mind, Leone's role in the novella amounted to something. Leone's role was to go through countless trials and tribulations, to get the main characters and get a happy ending. He had to suffer again and again and again. In other words, he is destined to be in danger all the time. The short story only described him as an idiot, but there was no mention of his animal behavior. The girl wouldn't be surprised if at one point the characters start dying. Soon the imperial family would be in for a bloodbath. The girl thought about how she needed to get out of here before it started. She thought about the fact that the girl was not suited for this job, so she decided to leave. Beatrice didn't know how she was going to get out of here, or rather, she needed a way to the front gate. Adler asked the girl about her sudden change of heart. The girl talked about how people tend to change their opinions abruptly. Adler talked about how the girl might be suspicious, but she was able to calm the master down, and it would be hard to find someone like her. Adler realized that he needed to convince her to spend the night here first, before he could persuade her to stay. The guy told the girl that it was fine and she could go. Beatrice was very glad that the guy didn't talk her into staying. It was a big relief for the girl. Afterward, the girl asked the guy for directions to the front gate. Adler didn't tell the girl anything about the gate, but told her that it was too much to leave at this time, and then he suggested that the girl sleep in the annex and go home in the morning. The girl agreed with the guy and told him about how great it would be. Adler talked about how the woman was very excited about the payment, and it looked like she was desperate for money, so the guy figured that in that case, she could easily change her mind after a night in posh conditions. Beatrice stood next to the man and talked about how maybe the moment wasn't right, but she would like to ask a question. Adler told the girl about asking what she was interested in. Beatrice looked at the guy and talked about how she would technically be spending the night here, which meant that she would still be paid 10 gold pieces. Adler agreed with what the girl said, and said about how that was the case. The girl then told the guy to tell them to pay her tomorrow morning, because a promise is a promise. The boy realized that she was desperate for money now. After a while, they came to the annex. Beatrice was surprised at how big it was. As soon as the boy and Beatrice entered the annex, the servants immediately lined up and said that they were happy to see her. Adler started pointing at the girl and saying that she was their guest and the servants should serve her in the best way possible. Everyone said that they understood and they would do it. The girl was very happy that she would be able to earn money. It was great news for her. Beatrice lay in an expensive bath and thought about the fact that it is customary to serve a guest who stays only for one night. All the servants were very kind to the girl. They were showing, telling, suggesting things. Beatrice was uncomfortable with such kindness. It was nice to be treated so well for once. Beatrice realized that if she stayed here, she would live luxuriously with these nice people. But something was stopping the girl. She realized that if she stayed here, she could die. She decided that she needed to think about what she would do when she left the estate. Something was happening to Beatrice. In her mind, she often thought of the young master as her dog, Dog Sung. The girl realized that it was a person, not a dog, and she shouldn't be wrong, but something was wrong. What Beatrice realized was that she must not drag herself into this. The next morning, Beatrice lay in bed and thought about just staying here to work. Beatrice thought about working for a year. There is still time before the main events of the novella begin. The main events of the novella begin with a dazzling reappearance in high society after a 3-year disappearance. The reason for her disappearance from high society was due to the annihilation from Trixie on the day of her debut. The girl's blood boiled as she remembered the horrible things Trixie had said to her. Trixie had dared to make fun of the main character's dress. The girl realized the fact that she was completely out of her mind. But about a month after Layla went missing, Trixie married that scoundrel Jamie and disowned her parents. This was how she punished herself for everything she had said to the protagonist. Beatrice realized that it was a perfect example of good triumphing over evil. The girl's problem was that now Trixie was her. She and Jamie's bastards have been married for about 1.5 years now. Soon, Layla with her appearance will shock the entire high society and get acquainted with the male protagonist, thus starting the main events of the novel. Before these events, the girl has 1.5 years. Beatrice realized that so affected by a year, she would be able to save enough money to get away from here. However, the girl was burdened by the fact that the novel did not describe anything about Leone's life on the estate. In other words, the events not mentioned in the novella might be much more frightening than she had imagined. No one knew what Leone would have to go through in the shadow of the 2 main characters. Even the girl's life for the last 1.5 years was not described in the novel, although it was hell. But still the girl realized that she could die, so she could not take such a risk. Beatrice apologized to Leone. After a while, a servant approached the girl. She began to ask the girl how her room was and if she was comfortable sleeping. Beatrice answered the girl that she was unbelievable. The servant brought the girl clothes as she had requested. Beatrice thanked the servant, and then she started talking about how, when she changed her clothes, Beatrice would already have a wagon waiting for her. The girl realized that it was time for her to return to her old life, and then the girl left the room and said that she was ready. When she left the room, she saw no one. Beatrice looked for at least one person, but could not find anyone, and then the girl heard a sound. There was a box in the middle of the room that contained a dog that looked exactly like Dosson. Beatrice said that it was the same as when she had found Dosung. The sounds were exactly as Dok-sung had made them. When the girl ran toward those sounds, she did not see the dog. It was Leon a Tartar who was in that place. Some man was standing next to Leon. He had a whip in his hands and was beating the guy. The girl immediately started yelling at him to put the whip away now. The man started telling the girl that they were just playing. The girl started telling the guy about whether it was a game. The man said that in order for the boy to sleep well, he should use all his energy in the morning. Beatrice understood that they were tiring Leon in this way, but they didn't know that it would only make him worse. Dok-sung was also suffering from bullying. The mere sight of the leash made the dog furious. The girl understood now why Leon was so agitated, for the lad lives in constant fear and can't rely on anyone. Beatrice looked at the guy and talked about how there was no way she would run away when she saw him in such a state. The girl shouted to the man to stop immediately. The man replied to Beatrice that he was not hitting him, and they were just playing. He is playing around, and so if the man stops, the boy will definitely attack him. The man was talking about how he shouldn't stop until the guy was exhausted. The girl began to shout and say that by such actions the man was only making him angry, so the whip should be thrown now. Beatrice was yelling and talking about how the loud, repetitive sounds were making the puppies uncomfortable. The man didn't realize what kind of puppies and what sounds made them feel bad. It was all good to him. The girl started yelling and telling him that she could repeat, and the puppies were uncomfortable with the loud repeating sounds the man was making with the whip. The girl talked to the man about trusting and putting the whip down, but the man talked about it being too dangerous. After a while, Leon pulled the girl to the ground. The man yelled to the master about her being a servant and not to do this. Beatrice was telling the man to back off and spoke about how she was fine. Beatrice was lying on the ground and saying hello to Master Leon. At some point, the boy began to listen to the girl's voice, but he still kept his grip. Beatrice understood the fact that he was hurting him, but at the same time, the girl was not afraid of him. The girl was telling the guy that they had a meeting yesterday, and Leon would definitely be able to remember if he smelled Beatrice's hand. Afterwards, the girl gave the guy a sniff of her hand. Leon sniffed it for a long time. The girl reassured him and told him that everything was fine. At some point, when the guy realized and recognized the girl, the master quickly bounced away. Beatrice talked about how the guy looked scared to death. It was because he was scared of hurting the girl. The girl started stroking the master's head and talking about how it must have been hard for the guy himself all this time. Leon did not answer anything and only wanted to be stroked. Beatrice was telling the guy that today was a good job, as this time the guy didn't growl at her and didn't consider her a victim. The girl smiled and told the guy about how he was very smart and the best. The man stood back and watched all this, and after a while he started calling the girl Professor. Beatrice went up to the man and asked him why he was calling the girl Professor. The man started talking about how he was Gordain, and he was looking over the young master. Gurdon asked that the girl teach him her techniques. The girl looked at the guy and talked about the fact that in this world there was no concert of creating a strong bond with animals as such. So Beatrice understood the guy's surprise, but still it was too early to call the girl Professor yet. Beatrice stood for a while and told Gordain about the fact that he could call her Trixie. And afterward, the girl began to ask Gordain if she had any treats for Master Leon. The man looked at the girl with surprised eyes. He began to talk about how they didn't usually have such a thing at the ready. In that case, the girl began to ask Gurdon if they had a bone with some meat left over. The man told the girl that they probably had it and ran off to look for it. Beatrice looked at the guy and said that they would wait then. After a while, the girl asked Leon about his condition and if he was okay. The girl noticed the fact that he was pale. There was something wrong with the guy. The girl touched the guy's face, but after a while Leone had already pushed off to the side and started saying the word monster many times. Beatrice didn't understand what was going on. She asked the guy where the monster was and what a monster was. The guy was afraid of someone and called him a monster. Beatrice asked Leone if he was okay. The girl had no way of knowing why he started yelling this so suddenly, but something suddenly happened. Leone shouted that he was a monster, and so he had to run away into the forest. After a while, the girl was sitting in her room, and the servants started asking the girl if they could go to their room. The girl sighed, and with a smile on her face said that they could go. One of the servants said that he had heard that the girl had been badly hurt. Another asked if the girl was all right. Beatrice didn't understand anything, and looked at the servants with surprised eyes. The servants knew that she was wounded in the shoulder, and talked about how it must have hurt. The girl talked about how she was really fine. After a while, the servants talked about how the girl should probably be in shock, so they brought tea. And after they brought a cake, they started talking about how it was much tastier. Beatrice looked at all this and thanked people. One servant began to say that the sun had already set outside, and it would be safer for her to spend the night here. Another servant told Beatrice that Sir Adler had said he would come for the girl in the morning, and that she should rest properly. The maid spoke to Beatrice about going to the main house tomorrow. The girl agreed and thanked her for her hospitality. The next morning, Beatrice realized that if she wanted to leave, no one would stop her. But she couldn't just leave after what she had seen yesterday, so Beatrice decided to check on Leon before she left. The girl started to get ready to go to Leon when she noticed that the whip was missing. Beatrice wanted to believe that the boy would not be hit with it again. As soon as the girl ran into the room, she started yelling that this time. Sir Adler was in the room, and Leon was lying on top of him with great aggression. Beatrice started asking Sir if he was okay, to which the guy replied not to go near him because Leon might attack the girl. Adler began yelling at Gordain to get Leon away quickly. Meanwhile, Leon grabbed Adler by the neck and began choking him, telling him to die. Sir began begging Leon to calm down and not do anything like that. It was a very creepy sight for Beatrice, as Leon was really trying to kill Adler. The girl shouted for help. Faster than the girl was Gurdon. He had a spiked whip in his hand and swung it at the master. Leon immediately bounced away and looked at Gurdon and Adler. Then the servant began to take a syringe out of his pocket. Beatrice looked at all this and couldn't believe that they had been using medicine all this time to calm him down. Beatrice didn't care how dangerous he seemed. It was too much for her. The girl began to ask Gordain if he was really going to drug Leon. Gordain did not listen to the girl and answered that it was too dangerous and Beatrice should move away. The girl did not move away and asked Gordain for a whip and a syringe. Beatrice began to ask about the guy trying to calm him down. The girl began to talk about relying on her, and Beatrice could calm him down, only she had to give it all away. Gordain didn't want to give it up, but Beatrice started talking about how Gordain saw what she did yesterday, so Gordain should trust the girl. The girl replied about how the guy is only getting angrier at the sight of these things, so Gurdon should not do it and calm down. Adler looked at all of this and asked Gordain what he was doing. Adler's response was that he can't hold Leon anymore, so he asked to carry the whip faster. Gordain talked about how he had indeed seen Beatrice handle the master without weapons or medicine, but the man also realized that if the girl failed, someone could die. The guy didn't realize what he should do and whether he could trust Beatrice. The girl did not wait and took the whip. Gurdon began to ask the girl what she was doing. Beatrice started telling the guy that she would not let go until Gordain gave everything back. The girl was telling Gordain to believe in her. Gordain wanted to object, but afterwards realized what they didn't have a good plan anyway, and they needed to trust Beatrice. Gordain handed over the whip and told the girl to be careful. Beatrice thanked the boy and took the whip from his hands. Adler began to ask Gurdon what he was doing. He began to ask why he was doing this, since now he wouldn't be able to speed up Master Leon. Gordain talked about how if what he saw on the street wasn't pure luck, and she might not succeed this time, it would be bad. The boy realized that all he had to do was believe in the girl. The girl went up to the master and began to ask him if he didn't like these things. The boy could not say anything, but he growled and cried. Beatrice threw the things away in front of the foreman and started telling him to look at her and see that the girl did not have those things in her hand. Beatrice said that she threw away all the scary things. The girl immediately recalled the moment with her dog. Dok Seong immediately realized that the girl had no treats left as she put her hands up in the air. Leone immediately looked at the girl and calmed down. Beatrice felt very sorry for the master because the girl realized that he was probably very scared. Leone was all alone in a world where no one understood him. The girl was familiar with it too, because she had been alone once, and Beatrice understands how it feels. The girl slowly approached the guy and told him that everything is fine and he has nothing to be afraid of, and she will make sure that the guy is not scared anymore. Leone started growling at the girl and afterward decided to grab her arm. Adler shouted to the servant to carry the syringe, for everyone had decided it was bad. Beatrice herself put her arm around him and talked about how he was a good boy. After a while, Leone calmed down and didn't want to attack anyone anymore. Adler was in complete surprise and realized that Gordain was telling the truth and not lying. Adler stood still in complete surprise and talked about taking Master Leon back to the cage, and then he turned to Beatrice and told her that he would renegotiate the contract, and she didn't have to go anywhere. The girl asked why and what there was to discuss, but Adler told the girl to just wait. After a while, Adler and the girl were sitting in a room. Adler started calling the girl Lady Beatrice Giuseppe, but Beatrice didn't like it, so she told the guy to just call her Trixie. The guy told the girl that he understood, and afterwards started asking him what the girl wanted. Beatrice didn't understand the question. Adler looked at the girl and talked about Master Leone needing the girl's help. Beatrice wanted to say something, but Adler interrupted her and told her to wait before giving up on it. The guy asked for the girl to hear him out. Adler started to talk about how Master Leone was brought here when he was 13 years old. It had been 5 years since then. As Master Leone grew, it was getting harder and harder to control him without brute force. The girl began to question the boy, so they began to use weapons and drugs. Adler told Beatrice about Master Leone needing tranquilizers because of his frequent nightmares. What about the whip the guy decided to tell her? Guy talked about how Leone had once hurt himself with that whip when they forgot to pick it up. He'd been afraid of it ever since. Beatrice didn't like that. She didn't understand how they could use the whip against the guy when they knew how afraid he was of it. Adler looked at the girl and talked about how she had no other choice. The guy was talking about how they weren't proud of what they did, and if it weren't, they wouldn't have coaxed the girl like that. After a while, Adler held something out to the girl and said something about how they were aware that this was what Beatrice needed. Afterward, the guy gave the girl some kind of paper. Beatrice had no way of knowing what it was. A smile surfaced on Adler's face, and the guy started asking Beatrice if she knew about destroying marriage history. Beatrice thought, and afterward began to ask the guy about what he meant to say that she could get a divorce. Adler talked about how that was exactly what he meant. The guy talked about how it wasn't possible for other nobles, but he could arrange it. Adler looked at the girl, and the smile never fell from his face. 20 million gold pieces. That's how much it cost to bribe the high priest to destroy the records. Adler replied that it was an incredibly high price, which is why no one had ever done it before. Beatrice understood what it meant that even the high priest would betray God for a lot of money. Adler looked at the girl and told her that if she worked here for a year, the guy would ask the high priest to destroy the records of their marriage, and Beatrice would be free forever. The girl couldn't believe her eyes that this could really happen. Adler watched the girl and saw that she was really tempted, and they finally had hope. Adler realized that if the girl was with them, the master would definitely be able to return. He would be able to return to his rightful place in the imperial palace. There was no way the girl could forget about the divorce. She did not believe that she could get a divorce if she worked for a year as a servant for the wild Leone. Adler asked the girl to speak up if that wasn't enough, because they really needed the girl's help. Beatrice looked at Adler and talked about how that wasn't the point. It was just that the conditions were too good for the girl to believe. Adler talked about how the girl had given them hope, so she deserved that payment. With the girl's help, Master Leone will be able to return to where he should be. The girl understood what the guy seemed to be saying about the imperial palace. Beatrice herself realized that she wouldn't be able to live peacefully if she went away and turned a blind eye to Leone's suffering. Especially the techniques she had trained Dok Seong with worked, so Beatrice realised that it was quite doable. The girl had hope that she could turn the wild Leone into a shining prince. If she succeeded, Leone wouldn't have to go through the suffering described in the novel, and Beatrice would get a divorce and the house of her dreams. The girl realised that she had nothing to lose, and afterwards she coughed and started asking Adler about the house they had negotiated that was also included in this contract. The guy looked at the girl and talked about how they could provide her with a mansion if the girl suddenly wanted it. Beatrice spoke with a smile about how she of course wanted the mansion. The girl said that she wanted a mansion with a large lawn and soft grass, that it was in an ideal location, that it was convenient to get to all the necessary places, and that its price continued to rise every year. Adler stammered a little and was shocked at the girl's living conditions. Afterwards, he said that they would definitely be able to find such a place for the girl. Adler waited for a while and asked Beatrice if they could regard this as acceptance of the contract. Beatrice told the guy that she agreed and would sign the contract. Adler showed the girl the sheet and told her to sign in a certain place. The girl tried to take her time and once again told the boyfriend to promise her a divorce. The guy talked to the girl about how she might not have to worry about it. And also the girl told Adler about how she didn't want to force Master Leone to learn to live like normal people if he didn't want to. The girl's only wish was to give Leone a more peaceful life. That was all Beatrice wanted. Adler started talking about how that's what he wants too, and what the rest of the people here want. The boy wants to see him healthy, calm, and finally able to smile sincerely. The girl understood that Adler really wanted a better life for Leone. He just didn't know how to help him. The girl realized that the boy probably already believed that the empire was destined to collapse because its only heir couldn't speak human. And what was worse, Adler realized that his master had closed in on himself and was suffering, but he didn't know how to fix the situation, which put even more pressure on him. Beatrice said that then she would add another condition to the contract. The girl talked about how training devices such as whiplash would not be used, and this includes syringes and medication. Adler said that he understood the girl's feelings, but refusing these things could be very dangerous. Then Beatrice began to think how the matter could be settled. The girl began to say that these things would only be used in the most dangerous situations, and of course they would need the girl's permission. Adler agreed with the girl and said that in that case, they had an agreement about all this. It was deep into the night. The girl sat on the bed and looked at her contract. She couldn't believe that she had actually signed it. Beatrice realized that now she would have to live in this place with Leone for a year. She didn't understand whether it was the right decision or not. Beatrice had so many thoughts that she could not sleep. After a while, the girl saw a full moon in the window. She immediately remembered Doc Siok. The girl talked about how her dog always liked the full moon. On the full moon, Doc Sung always made her way out for a walk. Beatrice was very worried about the dog and didn't understand what could have happened to it. The girl was telling the dog that her big sis missed the dog a lot. After a while, Beatrice gave up and decided to go for a walk and get some fresh air. The girl walked down the street and watched everything that was happening. She talked about how beautiful the moonlight and fresh air was. For Beatrice, this walk was very pleasant. The girl realized that this idea was a good one. Suddenly, Beatrice heard someone's howl. The girl immediately began to think that it could have been Leona's mother, but afterwards she laughed at her thoughts. The girl realized that even though he looked like a dog, he wouldn't howl at a time like this. The sounds did not continue. Beatrice could not believe that it was really him making those sounds. Beatrice walked over to some place and said something about how the sound seemed to be coming from here. The girl looked up and saw something on the roof, and it was howling all over the street. The girl looked a little closer and saw Master Leone. Beatrice immediately started laughing and talking about how he had pretty decent vocal cords. The girl realized that she couldn't get in there or tell him to stop doing that, so Beatrice decided to just go to sleep and not disturb the master. At some point, the master noticed the girl and jumped down from the roof to her. Beatrice was very much frightened and screamed at the guy. The girl started to tell the guy that he scared her and then asked him when he had time to come down. Leone only growled and answered nothing. The girl was glad that at least he wasn't afraid to approach her. Beatrice began to ask him if he was awake. In fact, The girl confessed that it was the first time that she could get a proper look at his face. Beatrice considered his eyes, and afterward began to talk about how if she kept looking into them, she felt like she would dissolve into them. Suddenly, Leona began to show his back. Beatrice didn't understand why he was doing this, and afterwards asked him about the fact that he wanted the girl to jump on top of her. The girl understood the fact that she could not ride on the back of her employer, so Beatrice answered the guy that she did not want to, and it was time for her to go to bed. And afterwards the girl asked the master if he wanted to go home together. The girl suggested the guy to go to bed and play in the morning. And also Beatrice told him about the fact that he could stay and play by himself, and the girl would go to the annex. Beatrice wanted to leave, but she didn't have time, because the master took the girl in his arms. The girl began to ask the master what he was doing. After a while, the girl noticed that the guy could stand on his feet. Beatrice asked the guy why he was walking on all fours. The girl replied to Leon that he was misleading her. Beatrice was yelling at the guy about putting her down. Suddenly, Leon replied to the girl about how everything was fine. Beatrice couldn't believe her eyes that Leon had just spoken. The girl heard what he said. Beatrice was shocked that instead of a snarl or a grin, the guy was able to formulate a sentence. Beatrice asks the guy about whether he understands what the girl is saying. Beatrice asked the boy to put the boy down because he was scared. After a while, the girl realized that the guy was going in a completely different direction, and her house was in the other direction. The girl was very scared and started asking Leon where they were going. It was still the middle of the night. Master Leon was walking very fast. The girl asked him to wait, as the manor was not even visible. Beatrice asked the guy if he could hear the girl. After a while, Leon put the girl down. Beatrice opened her eyes and looked at the place. It was crazy beautiful. The girl started asking the guy if this was the guy's favorite spot. The guy didn't say anything and only waved at the naked girl. The girl was very happy that the guy was so eager to show the place off. Beatrice called the guy good. She thanked the master for opening up to the girl and accepting her. The girl was stroking the guy's hair and head, as the master suddenly became angry and growled at the girl. Beatrice smiled and said that I think she was in a hurry. The girl realized that she had to constantly watch her actions. Beatrice said that Leon was like a puppy who was still wary of the girl. Beatrice was with Leon together in the forest. The girl was looking at the guy, and she was wondering when Leon started acting like that. The girl didn't understand who could have taught him that, or if he was different from others since birth. Beatrice said that he was able to say a few short words. Beatrice went up to the boy and called him, and then began to ask him what words he knew. The girl asked him if he knew the words you, who, and okay. Leon thought for a while, and started talking about how he knew the words no, good, hey, eat, no. Beatrice thought for a moment and then decided to continue. Leon started to say other words, such as spy, die, damn night. Beatrice thought for a while and then asked the master who the master was talking about. Leon started yelling and talking again about the bloody night. Beatrice started to ask the guy if she was talking about Adler. Leon nodded and talked about him being a damn knight. The girl said she didn't care, and that damn knight's name was Adler. Beatrice said to repeat after her, and then she started saying the word Adler slowly. Leon yelled not Adler, but the damn knight. Beatrice yelled and told the guy that he was saying a bad word, but the master didn't listen to the girl and kept saying only one word, damn knight. The girl realized that Leon hated Adler. Beatrice started pointing at herself and saying that her name was Trixie and her boyfriend's name was Leon. The master repeated his name after the girl. Beatrice praised the girl and said that everything was right and she was good. And then the girl told the guy to try to repeat her name. Leon, with all his might, tried to say the girl's name. First he said 3, and then he started asking the girl's name, Trick. Beatrice smiled and told the guy that it was right and he almost had it. After a while, Leon said the name Trixie. Beatrice was very happy about it. She said her name was Trixie, and afterwards she asked him if he could remember it. Leon repeated the girl's name several times. Beatrice began to praise the boy and told him that he was good and they would learn word by word. Suddenly Leon felt threatened. He picked up the girl, pulled her to him, and then took her in his arms. Leon began to shout that there was a beast, a monster nearby. Beatrice did not understand what kind of a beast, and if there was a predatory animal. The girl did not understand what kind of beast was there, for the short story did not speak of a beast at the foot of Mount Mito. Beatrice was very much afraid. She told the master that she had heard a rustling nearby. Meanwhile, Leone hugged the girl even more tightly, put his hand on her head, and told her all was well. Beatrice noticed the fact that Leone was trying to comfort her the way she did. The girl began to tell the boy that there was something there. She did not understand where the rustling was coming from. Beatrice understood the fact that beasts should definitely not be here, as the short story definitely said that no predatory beasts live at the foot of the mountain Mito. The terrain of the mountain is too complex even for humans, and these peaceful lands are like a paradise on earth for the anxious. The girl talked about how that was what it said. Beatrice was afraid and talked about how there was definitely something there. It was already late at night outside. Suddenly, Leone and Beatrice saw something in the bushes, and then it began to attack them. Something was walking towards them and was approaching them very fast. The girl was afraid and screamed Leone's name often. The boy pressed the girl closer to him, and then Beatrice closed her eyes, but nothing happened. After a while, the girl opened her eyes and was shocked to see a bunny emerge from the bushes. The girl was glad that it was only a bunny. Leone growled and was angry. The girl with a smile on her face began to tell the boy that he seemed to be as scared as she was. Beatrice started to calm the guy down and talked about how it was just a rabbit and he was a herbivore. After a while, the rabbit hopped away. Leone began to ask the girl if she was all right. Beatrice sat down on a rock, laughed and told the boy that they were two cowardly fools who were afraid of a common rabbit. Leone once more said the word fool. The girl laughed and told the lad about not memorizing such words. The girl talked about how from now on she would speak only good words. After a while, the master and Beatrice decided to go back. Suddenly they saw that very rabbit. The girl admired it and talked about how cute and small it was. Beatrice liked the rabbit's cheeks. They were chubby and cute. The girl was dying to see it. Leone did not like it. Beatrice stood for a while with the bunny and then told him to eat and she would not disturb him. The girl began to tell the master that they had to go back. Beatrice began to show the boy how to sleep. She told him that they needed to sleep. Leone looked at all this and could not understand what the girl wanted from him. And afterward, the guy told the girl no. Beatrice was shocked by this. She started asking the guy why not. Suddenly, at some point, Leone got on all fours and was looking for something. Beatrice started asking the guy what he was doing. The guy started moving in the direction of the rabbit. The girl was telling Leone about scaring the rabbit if he went there. Suddenly, Leone spotted a rabbit. As soon as the guy saw it, he stood up as if he was hunting it. Beatrice saw this and realized that it was a stand, and the guy was hunting the rabbit. And afterward, Leone was already jumping on the rabbit. The girl jumped up from the rock and ran to the guy. And after a while, Beatrice pushed the guy away from the rabbit and told him to stop doing that. The guy was lying with the girl on the grass. Leone pressed the girl's shoulders so that she said they hurt. Meanwhile, the master called out to Trixie. The girl jumped up and started talking to the guy about his bare skin and if he hurt himself. The girl talked about how she must have scared the guy and asked him again if he was sure he hadn't hurt himself. The girl started touching the boy and asking him if he was in pain. Beatrice said that Leone was covered in wounds and it was very difficult to see which one was fresh. Suddenly, the master uttered something that sounded like a chuckle. The girl couldn't believe her eyes. Leone was tickled. The girl called the guy a little rascal and then moved closer to him. The girl was talking about how the guy was ticklish, just like Doc Sung. Beatrice thought it was cute and tickled the guy. Suddenly, Leone quickly pulled out of the girl's arms, stepped back and called her name. Beatrice wanted to play around, but she knew she should restrain herself. After all, the guy was her boss. Beatrice held up her hands, apologized and said no more. After a while, that rabbit came up to Beatrice and Leone. The girl began to ask the boy if he wanted to eat it. The master waved his head, which meant a firm no. Beatrice then began to ask the guy what he wanted to do then. The boy pointed his finger at the rabbit. The girl looked at it all and told Leone that it was a rabbit, but she couldn't understand what the master wanted to do with it. The girl started to ask about whether her question was difficult. She didn't understand why the guy made some sound and waved his head. Leone looked at this rabbit and said Trixie's name. The girl nodded to the guy and asked him what next. Then Leone started talking about how the rabbit was Trixie. The girl was surprised that the guy was saying the girl's name, and meanwhile looking at the rabbit. The girl couldn't understand anything, but afterwards she still talked about making the guy remember that hunting is not allowed and it's forbidden. Leone said about it being bad. Beatrice looked at the guy and told him about taking the girl's hand. Beatrice told the guy that they should go. The guy smiled at the girl and took her hand, and after that they were on their way back. It was morning. Jamie was sitting at the bar having a drink. One of his acquaintances asked him what was wrong and why he looked so cheerful. Jamie replied about how since he got rid of the slacker, he could stop smiling. The acquaintance asked him about how by mediocre Jamie meant his pretty wife. Jamie was talking about how she might be pretty, but she was no good. And then the guy started talking about what about this Trixie chick. Jamie heard that the talentless girl was already dead. The guy's buddy said that might not be accurate, so we can rejoice. Jamie started talking about how if even the broker doesn't know if she's alive or not, then we can assume she's dead. The guy was cheering and telling everyone that the drinks were on him tonight. People cheered and told Jamie he was incredible. Joan the waitress came up to the guy from behind. She was telling the guy about how it looked like it was going to arrive again tonight, and it was all thanks to the guy. The girl was thanking Jamie. Joan got very close to the guy and started stroking his face, and then asked about maybe she should come to his house. The boy was very happy about it. He was crazy about the girl. Jamie started asking Joan if she would stay at his place tonight. The guy was telling the girl about how he was all over her. Joan was telling the guy about how she shifts when Jamie says that. The girl kissed the guy and talked about the meeting at his house. Jamie was over the moon, and afterward he said he couldn't wait. And then the girl started to walk away. Jamie, with a smile on his face, began to say that it looked like he was going to get married again soon. The friend began to ask about Joan, saying that she would marry a guy, and that Jamie was having a lot of luck with the ladies. Jamie said about how that wasn't true at all, and no one knows how much trouble that talentless mop gave him. After a while, Jamie said that if he had some more money, he would be the luckiest man in the world. Suddenly, a man walked up to the guy. He started talking to Jamie about how the guy seems to be in a good mood lately, and why Jamie should play a couple games with him. The man talked about how he knew a place that gave 100 gold pieces to start. Jamie didn't believe it. He talked about how no gambling house that let commoners in would go for that, unless the place is run by a nobleman or something. Jamie asked the man about whether they accept people like them. The man said they do, and with the 100 gold pieces you can just walk away. There were rumours that these gambling houses were run by an obscenely rich count. That's why nobles and commoners are allowed in indiscriminately. The man sat down and started telling Jamie about what he had heard, that Anderson had bought his house with the money he had won there. Jamie talked about how that was impossible because it was that he was a philanthropist of some sort. The man started to say that it is not that simple, and to enter there is one condition. Jamie listened to the man and asked what that condition was. These conditions were to play a game. You have to play the dealer at the entrance, and if you beat the dealer, you can be let in. Jamie asked about that, meaning he just had to win. The man said he does, and it's a simple test of the guy's luck. The man said it seems like since few people are let in, the odds of winning are low, but he told the guy why not give it a try. Plus, the guy told Jamie about how if you run out of money, thanks to his last name, he can always ask for more, and his useless wife may be dead, but she's still his family. Jamie thought for a moment. A smile played on his face, and he said that was right, and his useless wife could finally be useful. Jamie looked at Joan and said that the lady was too proud, and that if he had a lot of money, he could meet prettier and younger ladies, and borrowing Trixie's name shouldn't affect the guy in any way. After a while, the guy was already asking about where this playhouse was. Castle. Beatrice was standing near the well and looking at it. There were 2 buckets near the girl. Beatrice stood and thought about the fact that she could hardly carry it all with one hand. Beatrice had a broken arm, but she decided to try anyway. As soon as the girl wanted to pick up the buckets, Gordon started yelling to her and telling her to stop. After a while, Gordon came running to the girl and told her that she had not recovered yet. All the more reason for everyone to ask the girl to rest. Gordon asked the girl about why her injuries were getting more serious every day. The girl laughed and said about how it was. This injury Beatrice got a couple days ago when she tried to stop Leon from jumping on a rabbit, but the girl that if she told anyone the truth, they would only be more afraid of Leon. Beatrice screamed and talked about how she couldn't sit around and do nothing anyway. Beatrice is paid a lot as a servant in this place, and she ends up doing nothing. The girl stood and talked about how he needed to talk to Sir Adler. Beatrice talked about how she could probably get fired for negligence and she can't lose this dream job. The girl told Gurdon that she would leave the water on him, and afterward the girl left. Adler sat on his throne, reading a book, and said to come in. The door opened and Beatrice came in. She apologized and talked about whether she could at least sweep the floors. Adler looked at the girl's hand and talked about how he was clear and the girl was not allowed to work until she was fully recovered. Beatrice started asking to at least be tutored. Maybe Adler has some books about animals, like books about wolves, lions, rabbits. Beatrice was still wondering why Leon kept shifting his gaze from the girl to the rabbit. Maybe he found something in common in them. The girl talked about how she needed to study more to understand Leon better. Beatrice talked about how, if she had known it would be like this, she would have watched more animal documentaries in her past life. Adler asked the girl about books about animals. Beatrice said she did, and she wanted some facts about their habits, observations. Adler talked about how they had a famous book with hunters' records, but there was a problem in that it wasn't very detailed. Beatrice said that was fine, and then asked Adler if he could borrow the book. Adler said that he would look for it, and that the girl should stay in the hallway for the time being. After a while, Beatrice was already standing outside the door. The girl was glad that she had found something to do. Suddenly Gordane came up to the girl. He had buckets in his hands, and from his look you could tell that he was very tired. Gordane began to tell the girl about bringing water. The girl started telling Gordane that Adler told her not to work today, and afterwards the girl apologized for the inconvenience. Gordane was very tired and started talking about how he would just carry her back, and there was nothing wrong with that. Beatrice saw Gordane, and it didn't look like he was okay. The girl started apologizing. Gordane was telling the professor not to worry, and he was fine. The girl stood there for a while, and then started telling the guy that she would prefer if Gordane stopped calling her professor, because there are many people in the castle who know much more than Beatrice. The girl was talking about how she wasn't a professor at all. Gordane got angry and threw the bucket down and started asking the girl what to call her if not professor. The girl started talking about how she had a name, and Gordane could call her by her first name. The guy stood there, and afterwards told the girl how she would feel if he called her Mistress Trixie. Beatrice didn't like it. She yelled and talked about Gordane elevating the girl to the same level as Sir Adler. Gordane wanted to say something to the girl, but she interrupted him. Beatrice started talking about how the doctor said she had a disease that made her stomach hurt when she was called professor. Beatrice bent over and talked about how her stomach hurt very badly now. Gordane did not believe that such diseases really existed. Beatrice began to talk about how such diseases certainly do exist. The doctor had done a lot of research on this disease, and afterward he even wrote a doctoral thesis and became a professor. Beatrice could not believe that he actually believed this nonsense. The professor may not be as educated as the others, but he still realized that the girl was joking. Gordane started calling the girl professor, and meanwhile Beatrice pretended to be in pain. Beatrice leaned against the wall and said something about how Gordane should have just kept quiet. After a while, Adler approached the girl. He started asking her why she was still under the door. The girl laughed and talked about how she was socializing with Gordane. Adler nodded to the girl, and afterward gave her a book. Beatrice started to ask the guy if there was a room somewhere where she could read in peace and quiet. Adler told the girl to go to the third room down the first floor hallway. Beatrice said okay, thanked him, and went to study. Gordane shouted after the girl and told her that they had not yet agreed on the light of the girl's title. Adler had no way of knowing what the title was. Beatrice went to the door, took the key, and opened it. The girl looked around the room and talked about it being very dusty. The girl talked about how Jamie's house was a pile of dust too, but it was much worse here. The girl couldn't believe that this was exactly the room she needed. After a while, thanks to Beatrice, the whole room was clean. The girl sat down in a chair, opened a book and started reading. The girl decided to see what the book said. While reading the book, Beatrice commented on the fact that there are more animals in the book than she expected. Leone looked most like a wolf or a puppy. After a while, the girl found the section about wolves and started reading. When a wolf howls, it is trying to call out to its pack, so you have to run away immediately. Wolves hunt in a pack. If you meet one wolf, the others may be nearby, and in that case, it's better to run away. The girl could not understand what kind of book it was, for it only told her how to run away, and that was all. Beatrice said that there must be something useful in it, so she should read it for Leone's sake. A male wolf catches prey and starts eating it right away, but first he will offer the prey to the female. Wolves find a mate for life. Besides, many of them live in packs. Such packs are very much like families. The girl said that even humans have problems with loyalty, but wolves handle it much better. In conclusion, the book said that when you meet a wolf, you should immediately hide. The girl talked about what a skillful way of saying just run away. The girl couldn't understand what Leone was trying to do with that rabbit, because it didn't look like he wanted to eat it. Leone just looked at Beatrice once, and then at the rabbit, and then just moved his gaze from the girl to the rabbit. The girl couldn't believe her eyes that Leone was acting like this because of her. Beatrice finally realized what it was. Later, the girl came to Adler's house and started calling for him. The girl began to ask the guy if Master Leone was awake yet. Adler told the girl that he was awake. Beatrice started to ask the guy if she could come to him, but Adler told the girl a firm no, saying that they would manage on their own and the girl should rest. Adler was asking the girl about what she could do in such a state. Meanwhile, Gordain was playing nicely with Master Leone. The girl began to ask Adler if she was sure this was a game and not a hunt. The boy began to ask the girl if she could rest until she got better. The girl mentioned that she was not going to ask to be given a job. Beatrice talked about how she just wanted to see Master Leone. Adler could not believe that the girl wanted to see Master Leone. Adler began to talk about the fact that in that case, they were in the garden, and the Gordon took him for a walk. The man talked about how Gordan had learned a lot from the girl, so Beatrice could take it easy. The girl began to ask Adler about whether he had taken the whip with him. The man said that Gordon had not taken a whip, but had brought some kind of bone. Beatrice began to talk about Master Leone liking bones even more than Doc's son. Adler did not understand what the girl wanted to convey to him. Beatrice began to talk about going and supporting the book at her place for now. Adler told the girl about trying not to aggravate her condition. The girl agreed, and then quickly ran away. Beatrice went out into the garden. She saw Gordon shouting to Leona to catch a bone. The girl ran up to Gordain and said hello to him, and afterwards she went over to Leona and said hello to him too. The boy knelt down and rested his head against the girl. Beatrice began to ask him if he was a good boy. To this, Leone nodded. The girl decided to ask Leone something. Beatrice looked at the guy and asked him if he liked her. The guy smiled and nodded once more with a smile on his face. The girl was very happy about that. She hugged the guy and thanked him, and afterwards said about how now she understood everything and the guy took her as family. And Leone was trying to catch that rabbit for the girl because he liked her. The guy looked at the girl and nodded once more. The girl realized that this was great, and now she understood Leone's behavior. Beatrice told the guy about him being a good boy. That night the girl showed up on his howl. They walked together and the guy must have accepted her as his family. Beatrice was very glad of it. She spoke of it as the seeing eye of a dog girl who studied without respite. The girl was saying thank you to Leona for taking her in. The boy wanted to spell out the word thank you. Beatrice praised the guy and talked about how he did well and it should be said when you are happy. The guy nodded once again. Suddenly, Leone saw a bandage on the girl. The master began to call Beatrice and then asked the girl what it was and if it was a bandage. Beatrice began to ask him what it was and if he liked it. Leone looked at the blindfold and talked about how he didn't like it. Beatrice smiled and told the guy it was nothing. Leone started yelling about how the damn knight had done it. Beatrice laughed and started to tell the guy that Adler didn't do it and it wasn't his fault. The girl wanted to talk about not worrying about him. Suddenly, Leone took the girl's hand and brought it to his lips. Beatrice started asking Leone what he was doing. Meanwhile, the guy touched the girl's hand and then started licking it. The girl realized that the guy was probably trying to tell Beatrice to get better faster. Beatrice started telling the guy that she was fine and she was taking up too much of the guy's time, And then Beatrice told the guy to go and play with Gordain. Gordain started yelling at Leona. The master didn't want to react to Gordain in any way. Beatrice looked at the master and said that Gurdon was not a bad man and the lad should be a good boy with him. And afterward the girl told the lad that she would go and study a little. Leon repeated what the girl said about her having to go, and afterward he bought her dress and wouldn't let her go. The girl didn't realize what was going on. Leon picked up the girl and held her close to him. Beatrice was telling the guy that she had to go, but Leon was telling the girl no. The girl started asking the guy about not wanting Beatrice to go. The guy replied that she didn't want to. The girl talked about Big Sis needing to study. Leon asked the girl what she has to study. Beatrice said that was right, and so if the guy took another hold of Beatrice, the guy could be in trouble. The guy didn't listen to the girl and started taking her dress with his hand. The girl was angry and told him about why he was doing that, because she warned the guy. As soon as the girl looked at Leon, she saw a pleading look. The girl thought about the guy being a rascal. Leon looked at the girl and called her name. The girl began to talk about Leon playing the fool, even though she understood what the girl was saying. After a while, the girl and Leon were standing near Adler. Adler began to ask Beatrice what it meant and what had happened. The girl stood with a book in her hands. Near her, Leon was holding on to the girl's dress. The girl laughed and talked about Master Leon not wanting to move away from her. Adler couldn't believe it. He didn't understand how it happened that Master Leon refuses to move away from the girl. The guy was talking about Master Leon's past 5 years with Adler only trying to fight. Beatrice had told Adler that it just happened that way. Adler was talking to Master Leon about actually hating Adler so much. The guy was telling Leon about how he did so much for him and got nothing in return. Leon was still holding on to his dress and was telling Adler about how he was a damn knight. Beatrice pretended like she was nothing and said about how she was saying forget those bad words. Adlera started asking Leon what he wanted to tell him. In a little while, Beatrice was already rushing toward the door, and Leon was running after the girl. Adler shouted to the girl to wait, for he wondered what the bloody knight meant. Adler had no way of knowing what Leon was trying to say. The guy started to think about the bloody knight, and after he realized that the master was calling him a bloody knight. After a while, Beatrice was already standing in his room with Leon. Beatrice was shocked that there are so many neglected rooms in the castle, but it was definitely not Leon's room. The girl was telling the guy that he was loved, but suddenly the girl noticed a cage in the middle of the room. Beatrice had no way to understand what it was and why the guy needed it. The girl asked Leon what it was. The master did not say anything to the girl but just lay down in the cage and looked at Beatrice. The girl realized that Leon was sleeping here. Leon looked at the girl because he didn't want her to leave. Beatrice started to calm the guy down and talked about how she would not leave and would be here. The girl talked about the master not worrying and going to sleep. Beatrice went into the cage, sat down next to the guy and began to stroke his head. Now the master lay down on the girl's legs and closed his eyes. Beatrice started talking about how Leon was just like her dog, Doc Sung. The girl felt sorry that they couldn't be friends, because they had so much in common. The guy was looking into a book and saw her as a wolf. The girl started to ask the guy about whether he was like him. The master looked at the wolf stand in the book and stood also in front of the girl. Beatrice realized that Leon was more likely to be a wolf than a pup. Night began to fall. The first sunset began to appear outside. Adler came into the room and said that he had brought the bedclothes. The girl thanked the guy. Adler looked at the whole thing and said that it was strange for a woman to sleep in the same room with a man. And then the guy asked the girl if she was sure she was okay with it. Beatrice was telling the guy that the master still can't get away from her. The girl told Adler not to worry because Master Leon considered the girl his family. Adler didn't understand why this was happening. After all, he had spent so much time with the guy, and he chose the girl so quickly. Adler accepted that answer and talked about how he was more at ease if Leon considered the girl his family. Afterwards, he told the girl to have a good time. Suddenly, the guy felt something and quickly got up. Beatrice began to ask the master what was wrong with him and what happened. The girl began to ask who was standing there behind the door. Suddenly, the sound of Gordain was heard. Leon was angry and growling. The girl could not understand why the guy was acting like that. The girl talked about how Doc Sung was also wary of strangers and people on the street. Beatrice thought of Leone trying to guard her house in that way. Gurdon asked the girl if he could come in. Beatrice told Gaudain that she would go out herself and he had better not come in. Leona slowly followed the girl. After a while, the girl came out and asked Gaudain if her name was called. Gaudain began to ask the girl why she had come out so strangely. Beatrice began to tell everyone that Master Leone seemed a little dangerous right now. Gaudain was telling the girl that he thought Beatrice should eat, so he brought the girl food and Master Leone food too, of course. Beatrice was glad and afterwards thanked the boy. After a while, the girl came back to Leone and offered him lunch. Beatrice placed a plate of meat next to the boy. The girl talked about how she still couldn't get used to it. Afterwards, Beatrice talked about how it was time for her to eat too. Leone started to look at the girl and her food, and after that, he slowly started to walk towards Beatrice's table. The guy walked over to the girl and started looking at the mushrooms. And after a while, Leone was talking to the girl about being a monster. The master took the mushrooms in his hands and started to go somewhere. Beatrice told the guy that if he wanted the mushrooms, he could take them. After a while, Leone was already standing in the window and throwing mushrooms out of it. The girl began to ask the guy why he threw out the mushrooms, because they were perfectly fried. The girl started asking the guy about the fact that he did it because he didn't like mushrooms. Leone waved his head, and afterward the girl asked about the fact that there was something wrong with them. The guy nodded at that question and talked about how he didn't like them. Beatrice didn't understand how that happened, and if there was something wrong with them, or if he just didn't like them. Beatrice talked about how it was very difficult to understand Leone's language, and afterwards the girl started talking about how since they were going, it was as if they were sleeping now. The boy agreed with the girl and nodded. Beatrice stood in the room and did not understand where she should sleep, in the bed or in the cage. The girl didn't know if they should sleep together or separately. Leone pulled on her dress and told her that they had to sleep together. Beatrice was happy about it because she really slept with Doc Sung all the time, so she could sleep with Leone. The girl took the boy's hands and said about them sleeping together. Afterward, the girl started climbing into the cage. The girl sat in the corner and thought about whether it would be okay for him to have Beatrice sitting here in the corner. Leone didn't like it so much, so he went over to the girl and took her in his arms and laid her down gently. The girl started to ask Leone if she minded if she slept here. The master called out to the girl and showed her hand to the spot. The girl started to ask the guy about what he wanted her to lay here. After a while, the girl and Leone were already falling asleep together. The girl had never thought of sleeping in a cage. Beatrice began to thank the boy for today. The master was already sleeping a sound sleep. The girl looked at all this and talked about how the guy must be tired. The girl wanted Leone to get along with everyone and be happy. At first, Beatrice just wanted people to realize who he was, but now she also wanted everyone not to be afraid of him. The girl wanted him to be able to talk and laugh with others. Beatrice talked about teaching Leone to live as a human being, so he would no longer have to be afraid and could express himself. But to do that, you need to find out from him what he has experienced in the past and what exactly he is afraid of. The girl stroked the boy's head and afterwards wished him good night. Beatrice told the sleeping guy that she promises to keep him safe. The morning came. The girl already shouted to the guy that he should not jump out the window, because it is not a door, and especially they are on the second floor. Beatrice wondered if Leone had already jumped from here. The girl began to tell the boy that from now on he should go out through the door instead of through the window, and afterwards Beatrice asked the boy if he understood that. The master took the girl by the hand and nodded to her. The girl and the guy walked down the hallway. Suddenly you saw Adler. He started wishing the girl good morning. Beatrice wished Adler the same thing. Adler couldn't believe that Master Leone was coming down the stairs, because Adler was always worried that he would hurt himself jumping out of the window. The boy was very happy about that. Adler began to ask Leone if he had gotten a good night's sleep, and if he felt any discomfort from sleeping with another person. Leone turned away from Adler and said nothing. Suddenly, Adler started asking the girl if her stomach hurt by any chance. The girl surprisingly told the guy that she was fine, and afterward asked what was wrong. Adler told the girl that it looked like the mushrooms from yesterday's breakfast were spoiled, and everyone who ate them had a stomachache. Beatrice began to remember about yesterday. The girl realized that Adler was talking about the mushrooms that Leone had thrown out of the window. Beatrice began to tell the guy that now she understood why he had thrown those mushrooms. And then the girl began to thank the guy and stroke his head. The girl knew that the guy was very kind. After a while, the girl and the guy were sitting outside. Beatrice wrote her name on the grass and told the guy that everything was ready and the guy could repeat after the girl. Beatrice slowly repeated her name, Trixie. Leone only spoke the name Trix. The girl corrected the guy and talked about how her name was not Trix, but Trixie. The girl understood the fact that the guy wanted to be with her, but he didn't want to learn. After a while, Gurdon approached the girl and the boy. He immediately began to wish them good morning. Beatrice wished the same to Gurdon. Beatrice noticed that Gurdon was carrying a huge bag. The girl could not wait, so she began to ask Gurdon what it was. The boy began to answer that he had managed to get the bones of a cow that had just been slaughtered. Gordane was telling the girl that Leone must like it. Beatrice decided that he did, and he should like it. The girl was talking about how Gerla looked scary when he was smiling like that with the bloody bag in his hands. The master didn't really like Gurdon, so he picked up the girl and pulled her closer to him. Gurdon laughed and told the master that he would not get too close, so the boy could take it easy. Beatrice didn't understand why the boy was reacting like that, because he sees Gordane all the time. The girl told the guy not to behave like that, because the master could hurt Gordane. Leone didn't listen. The girl did not realize that she had been too soft with Leone. Beatrice at once remembered herself in the past. She had sat in the room with Doc Sung and talked to the dog about today's problem dog, Milo. The problem was that her master had been too kind to her, and it didn't bode well. The girl talked about how it was rightly said that you shouldn't touch a dog too often without a reason. Beatrice decided that something needed to change, so the girl decided that now she would be stricter with the master. The girl with an angry expression told Leona to sit down. After a while, the guy sat down and stared at the girl. Beatrice couldn't believe that Leone actually sat down. She decided that the presenter was right when he talked about being strict with his dog. The girl thanked the guy very much for all of this. Beatrice was happy about it in her heart, but she tried not to show it and called the boy good. The girl noticed the fact that Gordane hid behind a tree. Beatrice was glad that Leone had listened to her. The girl stroked the boy's head and told him what a good boy he was. Beatrice was telling the lad about how no one in this castle would hurt anyone. The girl told him that if he growled at everyone, they would get scared, so they shouldn't act like that. The girl told the guy that it didn't look like he was angry, and most likely Beatrice was talking about how it probably worked out. Beatrice suggested that the guy go back to his room, but the girl told the guy about sleeping alone tonight. Leona didn't really like that idea, and he once again questioned the girl about sleeping alone. Beatrice told him that he was a big boy, so he needed to sleep alone. Leone started looking at the girl with pleading eyes and calling her name. The girl started telling the boy about Leone not to look at the girl with those eyes. Beatrice talked about how she can't be hard on the boy when he does that. The girl told herself not to fall for it. After all, she needed to teach him what was right and wrong. Beatrice looked at the guy and told him about how she wouldn't sleep with him, even if Leone looked at the girl with those eyes. The girl talked about how even Doc Seong realized that she made a mistake when she talked to her in a monotone, stern voice. Beatrice told the guy about them going home, but something was going on strangely with the guy. The girl didn't understand why the foreman was just looking at the girl. Beatrice thought about how she needed to be even stricter. Beatrice started to tell Leone to stay here, but the girl would still leave. Leone still just stared at the girl. Beatrice was getting ready to leave and was telling the guy that she was leaving. "Walking slowly," said Leone for now. The master thought for a bit and decided to follow the girl after all. Beatrice exhaled and told the master to go home. After a while, the girl and the guy were standing outside his room. Beatrice started telling the guy that she was leaving him till tomorrow. Beatrice began to tell the boy that if anything, he would go down the stairs, and then the girl began to ask him if he understood or not. Dione said nothing, and afterward went into his room. Beatrice closed the guy's door and was glad that she had succeeded. The girl was happy that things were going better than she thought. Suddenly Adler stood behind the girl and called out to Beatrice. Adler began to ask the girl where she was going. Beatrice began to answer the guy that she was going to the annex. Adler began to ask the girl if she was sleeping with Mr. Leone tonight. Beatrice began to tell the knight that he should realize that it is not good to be with Leone all the time. The girl talked about how from now on she would be tougher on the guy, even if the guy tried to stalk her. Adler didn't understand what it meant to chase the girl. Adler talked to the girl about how Master Leone doesn't growl at the girl, or even try to jump on her. Leone actually voluntarily goes after the girl. Adler didn't understand how this happened since he always growls at him, and Gordane was attacked at all. The guy couldn't understand why Master Leone was just going after the girl. The guy had never experienced something like this, although he has been serving the master much longer than the girl. Adler began to ask the girl what her secret was. Beatrice could not understand what the guy wanted from her. Adler began to talk about the secret, why Leone follows Beatrice everywhere. The guy talked about how he was really jealous of the girl. The guy was about to say something, but suddenly he heard someone yell out to him about being a damn knight. Leone jumped off the chandelier right towards Adler. Parquet growled at Adler and was very angry. The girl started telling the guy to stop his growls right now. Beatrice asked the master if he was going to be mean for much longer. Leone looked at the girl and called her by name. Beatrice told the boy not to attack people like that. Beatrice talked about how only bad people do that. Leon felt sad and looked at the girl. Beatrice was angry at the guy and talked about following her. There was no way Adler could believe that Leone called him a damn knight as he looked at him. Adler couldn't believe he was a damn knight. The girl brought the guy to his room and told him about not coming out anymore. The guy was very sad and didn't answer the girl anything more. Beatrice came out to Adler and apologized for Leon. She started talking about how he should have been better trained. Adler told the girl not to worry, because before the girl they had to calm him down by force in general. Adler was talking to the girl about how, really, it was all his fault. The guy was talking about staying in the house and watching over Master Leone. Beatrice couldn't believe it. Adler talked about how if Leone had a nightmare, he would jump out again like he did now, and then there would be chaos. Beatrice told the knight about how she could just stay with Master Leone. Adler began to tell the girl that if she stayed, Master Leone would become even more attached to the girls, so it would be better if the girl went to the annex for now. Beatrice told the boy about how she understood everything. Beatrice understood that no matter how hard it was to leave, she couldn't sleep with Leone every night. Beatrice talked about how the boy might jump out of his room again in the middle of the night, and then the girl calmed herself down and decided that the master would be all right. Eventually the girl came back. Beatrice didn't know what to do or what method to use so that there would be a way to get back in. Beatrice decided what she thought she could open this window. The girl talked about how she remembered that this window did not close completely. It was just as the girl had said. Adler began to ask outside the door who was here. The girl started calling out to Adler and talking about how it was her, Trixie. Adler did not understand what the girl was doing here at this hour. Beatrice began to tell the boy that she was worried and couldn't sleep. Adler didn't understand why she had to climb through the window for that. Leone's familiar voice came from the window. Beatrice immediately ran to the master as she was very worried about him. As soon as Beatrice opened the door, she saw the guy who was having nightmares. The girl didn't understand what was wrong with Leone. She started to ask the master if he was okay. After the girl decided to ask the mayor of Adler what had happened, the knight told the girl to be careful. Leone jumped up and immediately jumped on Adler. The girl started yelling at the guy and calling him names. Adler pushed the girl away and pulled the girl against him. Adler began to ask the boy if he had a terrible dream. Adler asked Beatrice if he could somehow calm down Master Leone, but she realized that Leone wouldn't recognize her. The girl tried to do something, but realized that Leone would not recognize her. Adler started trying to calm the guy down, but Leone only started attacking harder. Adler was yelling to the girl about how they needed tranquilizers immediately. The guy was telling Beatrice to carry them faster. Meanwhile, Adler tried to calm the guy down and told him that it was just a dream. What Beatrice realized was that she was wrong. The girl thought that she was doing the right thing with Leone. It seemed to Beatrice that he was better, but the girl was wrong. Leone was still a wild beast. Suddenly from behind, Beatrice began to call for Master Leone. The master responded to his name, but in the meantime Adler was pushing the lad to the floor and telling the girl to act faster. The girl realized that if nothing was done, Leone and Adler would be seriously hurt. Besides, Leone was scared, so the girl decided that he should be calmed down. Beatrice began to ask Adler where the tranquilizers were. The guy yelled to the girl to look at the cabinet on the right. Beatrice opened the cabinet and saw a syringe. She took it and walked over to Adler. The guy started asking the girl if she could inject. The girl said she would have to try. Leone was screaming and didn't want to do anything. Adler asked the master not to move. Then Beatrice also came close to the master and asked him the same. The girl apologized to the foreman and afterwards gave him a shot. As soon as Beatrice gave the injection, Leone started looking at the girl and calling her name. The girl would smile and tell Leona to get some rest, and they would play all day tomorrow. Adler would get up off the floor and tell the girl that she had been through a lot and she should go back to the annex. Out of the corner of his eye, Adler noticed the girl start to cry. When Beatrice had first brought Doc Sock home, she had barked at every stranger. Then the lady who was temporarily taking care of the dog told Beatrice about Doc Sung's injury. The lady talked about how when a stranger came over, the dog thought the girl wanted to give her away. Doc Seong was just afraid of being abandoned again. If Beatrice had known about Doc Seong's pain back then, it would have taken her much longer to understand her then. Similarly with Doc Sung, Leone's aggression must have a reason. The girl didn't understand what had happened to Leone and why he was acting like that. Beatrice approached the knight and spoke about one thing she needed to know. When monsters are mentioned, you can see wild terror in Leone's eyes, and moreover, he suffers so much from nightmares. The girl talked about something definitely happened to Leone. The girl asked the knight what Adler went through and what happened to him. Beatrice talked about how she needed to know what he was afraid of. Adler thought for a while, and afterward talked about what he thought was impossible. The girl talked about telling the guy about what he needed to tell her, since they wouldn't be able to help if the trauma got worse. Adler talked about how he didn't know anything about the master's injury. The girl was talking to the guy about how she could get away with even the slightest bit of speculation. Adler sighed, and afterwards started telling the girl that this information could put the girl's life at risk, so sometimes it was better to remain in the dark. The girl yelled to the guy about being understood. Beatrice yelled and told Adler that she needed to know what Leone was afraid of, and the risks were not important to her. Beatrice was telling the guy that it was all about Leone, all for Leone. This was what Adler had told himself countless times. The knight walked over to the master and patted him on the shoulder, and then told the girl that nothing would come of this for the girl or for Leone. And then Adler told the girl to go back to the annex. The guy walked away and closed the door in front of the girl. Beatrice stood and asked the guy about what he thought about the girl deciding to give up so easily. Beatrice talked about how the female protagonist, Layla, and the male protagonist, Emmett. The villain, Evans, and the great teacher's name is different too. The girl wrote that Leone gets along with others, but to do that, you need to learn more about his history. At first the girl wanted to just talk to Leone, but while the master is in this state, she can't talk to him. The girl thought about the fact that she could try to talk in his language, but she doesn't understand it, much less learn the language of animals. However, Leone does slowly learn the girl's language. So the girl decided on the fastest way then. Beatrice began to think and choose the best teacher for Leone. Suddenly the girl remembered one teacher whose name was Luton. Beatrice talked about how this was the perfect teacher for Leone. Luton was the fourth son of a humble baron living in a village on the outskirts of the empire. He didn't inherit an honourable title like the others, nor could he move to the capital. Abandoning thoughts of great success, he decided to use his teaching skills by becoming a teacher in an orphanage. Luton had a talent for teaching children that everyone else put a cross on. However, he was still the fourth son of the humble baron. This factor held back the spread of his reputation as a good teacher. But after 10 years of trying to become famous by coincidence, he was approached by Layla. Because of his ambition, he accepted without thinking. Eventually, he gave up his achievements in the field of education, and then he became the first director of the largest academy, earning the title Father of Education. His name was running through her head, and she was glad she remembered his last name. The girl decided that she would ask Adler about him tomorrow. Castle. There was a man sitting on a throne asking his servant if he was sure he had found him. The servant replied that they had found a man matching the description at the estate at the foot of the mountain. The man asked the subordinate if it was really General Bede. The servant immediately remembered Leon's visual picture and told the man that it was true, and it was so. The servant talked about how this man with blonde hair had been seen late at night with a short lady with curly brown hair. The man began to ask the servant if they had sorted him out. The servant replied that unfortunately they had lost him because General Bede was too worried, but they were able to write down the names of the nearby mountains, so they would just have to wait for a good moment to dispatch the assassin. The man was glad that they would finally be rid of the damn prince. It was morning at the castle. Beatrice stood near the door and talked about how she was now beginning to worry. After a while, the girl decided to knock. Adler sat in the study and thought about maybe he should ask him again. Meanwhile, the girl stood outside the door and talked about how she should go ahead with the plan to find out everything about Leon as soon as possible. The girl walked through the door and called out to the guy. Adler started yelling at the girl to talk if she had something to say. The girl couldn't understand what the girl had. Then Adler started asking the girl what she wanted to talk about this time. Beatrice called Sir Adler and told him what she thought about how to improve Master Leon's condition. And then the girl came to the conclusion that he needed a teacher now. Adler could not understand what kind of teacher and why Leon would need him. The girl began to tell him that Master Leon needed a wise and experienced teacher who could teach him language and etiquette. Adler began to tell the girl that she had seen for herself what state Master Leon was in yesterday. The boy agreed with the girl, but it was too dangerous. The girl started asking the guy what she should do to get the knight to let the girl hire a teacher. Beatrice talked about how she would do anything if the guy would only ask. Adler began to tell the girl that if Master Leon could call Adler by name, he would consider the girl's offer. However, the boy doubted that the girl would succeed. Beatrice was glad that was all she had to do. Adler began to tell the girl that if Master Leon called him by name, he would give the girl 1,000 gold pieces, but the knight was sure that would never happen. Beatrice, with a smile on her face, told the guy that in that case they had a deal, and since they were discussing it, Beatrice had a candidate for Master Leon's teacher. Adler began to ask the girl who it was. Beatrice talked about the fact that it was about when she was the daughter of a noble family, she herself was taught by a rather talented teacher. Beatrice talked about how her teacher had told her about a talented teacher who taught at the village orphanage. Adler began to ask the girl about her advice to the village teacher, Master Leon. Adler was angry and talked about how Master Leon only wanted the best of their empire. Beatrice talked about how there was a subtlety to it all. The girl had heard that this teacher was incredibly good at teaching people with language problems. More so, he was able to teach those who were considered unlearnable by others. Adler asked the girl about whether there was a way to train such people. Beatrice told the boy that he had developed it himself. Adler said that if this teacher was able to teach those who the others had given up on, then maybe this teacher would be able to teach Leon. After a while, Adler asked the girl what his name was. Beatrice began to talk about the fact that she was just there for the occasion. The girl talked about how she didn't remember the teacher's name, but only knew the surname. The girl began to ask the guy if she could look at the journal of the noble houses. Adler gave the girl a paper and said that the information was 5 years old and might not be up to date. That said, if he was a teacher all along, he should be here. The girl asked the knight if she could read here. The guy waved his hand and showed her where to sit. Beatrice was sure that his last name was Luton. After a while, the girl had already found everything. Benjamin Luton, the village of Sale, it was definitely him. The girl talked about making him a teacher before the main events of the novella began. Beatrice stood in the room, opened the curtains, and talked about what a beautiful day it was. Beatrice was curious to know what time of year Leona liked. The girl thought that it could be summer or it could be winter. The girl talked about how she kept asking Doc Sung about what she liked. Doc Sung couldn't answer the girl's question, but Beatrice kept realizing what she liked. The girl remembered the dog and felt sad. Beatrice told herself not to fall into depression. Beatrice was sure that Doc Sung was fine. Leon sat in the cage and called out to the girl. Beatrice looked at the guy and asked him what he wanted. After a while, the girl was already sitting in the cage next to the guy. The master started asking the girl if she was okay. Beatrice said that a speck of dust got into her eye and she was fine. Master reached his hand to the top of the girl's head and then started stroking her and talking about what he liked. The guy smiled and talked about how he liked Trixie. Beatrice smiled and told the guy that she liked him too. And after a while, the girl started asking Leon how he got on last night and if everything was okay. Leon nodded with a smile on his face. The girl started to tell the guy that he seemed to be in a good mood today. The master smiled once more and said that he was fine and in a good mood. The girl didn't understand why he was so nice. Beatrice asked the dear author to help the girl not to fall for Leon's incredible beauty. Beatrice started telling the guy that she wanted to ask him for a favor. The girl was telling the guy that he might not want it, but the girl was asking the guy to help her by practicing something. Beatrice began to tell the boy about memorizing one name. That name was Adler Vikingham. The girl was telling the guy to try to memorize that name. Beatrice was telling the guy to repeat after her. Beatrice was telling the guy the name Adler, but instead she heard Bloody Night from Leon. The girl said the name Adler several times, but Leon didn't want to say it and repeated after the girl Bloody Night. The girl realized that it wasn't going to be that easy. After a while, the girl and Adler were walking down the corridor. Adler asked the girl if she was sure that Master Leon wanted to see him. The guy was talking to Beatrice about how they hadn't seen him since his nightmare, and did he really miss Adler? Guy couldn't believe that Leon wanted to see Adler since he spends all his time with Beatrice. Adler was talking about how he was nervous, because it had been a long time since he had met Master Leon like this, in the middle of the day. The guy was telling the girl that it wasn't that he blamed Beatrice. The girl shouldn't have misunderstood him. Beatrice told the guy that he could take it easy, because she had asked Leon to behave himself. Adler couldn't believe that the girl had been able to ask him for something. The boy couldn't believe that the girl had made him obey. Adler began to ask the girl how she managed to communicate with Master Leon. The boy asked so many questions that the girl didn't know what to answer. Beatrice told Adler to go, and then he would see for himself. After a while, the girl and the boy were already outside. Gurdon was hiding behind a tree and asking for help. Meanwhile, Beatrice responded to the wizard and said that they were here. Leon just stared at Adler at first. Adler couldn't believe that the master really wouldn't attack him. Adler started to ask the girl if he looked good, because he needed to be sure. After all, it had been a long time since he had seen Master Leon so close. Beatrice was telling the guy about how he looked as good as ever, and there was nothing wrong with him as far as his appearance was concerned. The girl stopped the guy a little, and afterward told him about her coming up first, and then when the guy was, he could come up slowly too. Adler started to call for the master, but he growled. Immediately the girl touched the guy's face and told him about being quieter, for they had practiced on this. Beatrice told the guy to try again. Leon wanted to say the name Adler, but immediately stopped saying it, and instead said Bloody Night again. The girl couldn't understand why this was happening, and if it was too soon. Beatrice said to herself that it was her fault, and not the master's. The girl was very sad, and Leon noticed it. Beatrice said that if he had been taught by a professional, it would have been much easier. Leon watched the girl, and then said the name Adler. Beatrice couldn't believe it. She started to ask the guy again what he had just said. Meanwhile, Leon repeated Adler's name one more time. Beatrice was very happy, and called the master a smartass. The girl talked about looking at his smart boy. Beatrice talked about how Leon was incredible. The girl asked the boy if he remembered that, since they were practicing. Leon nodded to the girl. Adler looked at the girl and didn't understand how this was possible. He was surprised from the fact that Leon understood the girl's speech. The girl told Adler that she did, and then she walked up to the knight, pointed at him, and asked him who he was. Leon did not want to answer in any way, and called Adler a bloody knight. Beatrice didn't know what to do, because Adler must have been looking forward to this, and these words might offend him. Meanwhile, Adler stood staring into the distance, unable to believe that Leon was talking. The girl realized that she seemed to be worried for nothing, because Adler was touched even by the name-calling. Beatrice realized that while Adler was touched, he needed to show what Leon had learned. The girl asked Leon if he could say his name. Beatrice asked the guy what his name was. The guy pointed his finger at himself and said his name was Leon. Adler fell to his knees and was shocked by this. Beatrice started calling out to Adler and asking him if he was okay. Adler cried and told the girl that he didn't know how to thank her. The girl said that Leon was just a very good student, Adler said that's not what Leon used to be able to do. He only knew how to attack people. Adler couldn't imagine the guy being able to answer questions and call him names. Adler talked about how that was enough already, and let Leon call him a damn knight even 1,000 times. Adler bowed and told the master that he was his knight, and Adler would do his best to go from a bloody knight to an incredible knight. Adler asked the master for a chance at that. Leon looked at Adler. Beatrice was watching Leon. Beatrice was talking about whether Leon had ever looked at Adler like that before, kindly and without a drop of anger. Adler talked to Trixie about accepting the girl's offer after all he had seen, and hiring the teacher Beatrice had recommended as soon as possible. After a while, the maid would get angry and yell about how this was possible and why Sir Adler was leaving the estate. This was the main economy of Jan's estate. Beatrice told the girl that she understood that she was worried, but it was all for Leon's sake. After a while, Adler approached them. The girl immediately noticed Sir Adler's hair. They were neat and tidy. Beatrice told the boy that such a neat style suited him. Adler did not believe that it was true because he still could not get used to it. It was the first time the housekeeper had seen Adler tidying his hair. The maid asked the guy what was going on with him, and if it was all because of Beatrice. Adler slowly approached the girl and told Jen about how Trixie had helped them all incredibly, and thanks to the girl, Master Leon was much calmer. And soon he will be able to talk and act like a normal person at all. Adler talked about how now Master Leon would get better and better every day, so Adler, as his knight, also wants to get better. The guy had made up his mind about the fact that he should now put an end to his neglected appearance. Janie talked about how if that was the guy's decision, she would have no doubts. The maid hoped that the lad would return safe and sound. Adler thanked the girl and said that she would keep an eye on things while she was away. And then he went over to Beatrice and asked her if she was sure she could handle Gordane alone. The girl talked about how of course they could handle it. After all, Adler has called 4 knights to replace her, and they are all so creepy that the girl is afraid to even meet their eyes. Gordane said that everything would be all right, because Beatrice was with them. Gurdon started talking about the professor's legendary training skills. The girl didn't like it, so she asked just to be quiet. Adler talked about how he would leave more knights with them if he could, but given the circumstances, you shouldn't bring too many people. Afterwards, Adler told everyone to be careful. The girl understood the fact that Adler was uneasy about leaving the manor. Adler chose this place because of the difficult mountainous terrain to protect Leon. If too many people come here, Leon will be found out sooner or later. It's almost like giving his exact location to Grand Duke Evans. Therefore, Adler can't call for more knights or seek help elsewhere. Now the girl understood why Adler personally came to pick up the girl instead of asking a servant. Besides, this village is very far away. Adler is the fastest, so he should go. Adler was telling everyone that he would try to return as soon as possible. Gordane and the girl wished him good luck and a good journey. Beatrice said that she thought Adler was worrying for nothing, because he should enjoy his life too. After all, he was still young. Gordane said that it was for sure, and at that age, you should build a family. Gordane was sure that if he didn't have to leave the estate, he wouldn't even cut his hair. Gordane replied that he had not seen his lady of the heart from the capital for 5 years. The girl could not believe that Sir Adler had a woman he loved. Gordane had said that he thought he would marry her when he could return to the capital. The girl realized something that she thought she had read about in a novel. The girl had forgotten her name. She had been patiently waiting for Adler in the capital for years. The guy was willing to forget about the woman he loved for Leon. This shows how much Adler cares for his master. Gurdon said that the thought of being separated for 5 years made his heart ache. The girl said that she too had a very sad story to tell. Gordane began to tell the girl that maybe if Leon got better, Sir Adler could go to the capital with a clean mind. Gordane told the girl to do what they could. The girl was surprised about Adler and Gordane doing what they could for others. Beatrice understood that they needed to work harder for the common good. The girl was sure that this would be possible when Benjamin was with them. People began to gather in one place. One of them started telling everyone that he was glad they were here. Afterwards, he said that Adler had left and they could start. The man gave the girl money, but she was indignant and said that this was not the amount they had agreed on. The man was telling the girl that if they wanted the full amount, they had to capture the beast alive. even if it could barely breathe. And then the man started talking about the other people on the estate. The man said to kill them all. Beatrice sat on the bed next to the doctor. The doctor began to tell the girl that Beatrice was feeling much better. The doctor told the girl that thanks to the fact that the girl had not moved her arm, she was able to recover faster. Beatrice smiled and talked about how she couldn't move because the doctor had bandaged her up perfectly. The doctor laughed and talked about how Sir Adler was able to do it even with a bandage. The girl laughed and said that he was Sir Adler. The doctor began to tell the girl not to overexert herself, for the girl had recovered, but she could still be easily hurt again. The doctor told the girl to be careful and to come if Beatrice felt even the slightest pain. The girl told the doctor that she would do everything, and afterwards wished her good luck. Beatrice felt good stretching. She talked about how she was unlikely to manage to injure herself like that again, so she should be careful, and afterwards the girl realized she could go. 10 days had already passed since Adler's departure. So far there had been no trouble, and things were pretty peaceful. Gurdon was running from Leone, and the master was running after Gurdon. The girl was telling herself that there was another peaceful day ahead, so it would have to be enjoyed to the fullest. The girl opened the door and called for Leone. The master was nowhere to be found, but Gurdon was crying. The girl began to ask Gurdon what had happened to him. Gurdon began to say that he was finally able to stand next to Leone without the girl's help. Beatrice was glad, so she congratulated Gordane on that. The girl realized that Gordane seemed to be fine. Beatrice wanted to check on Leone some more. The girl saw that the guy was sleeping soundly, so she decided not to touch him and leave him alone. Beatrice was glad that he was all right and that he was fine. The girl realized that if Leone lost control of himself, the 4 knights would hold him back. Beatrice didn't want to see that happen. When Adler had not yet left, he had told the girl that it was best to keep sedatives with her. Apart from the sedative effects, all the ingredients in them are beneficial, so the girl could be worried. The girl said that as much as she wanted to stop using sedatives on Leone, Adler convinced her, and the girl really realized that the drugs made Leone much calmer. The girl realized that she would leave it like that until Adler returned. Gordane began to tell the girl that sedatives worked well, but it wasn't just the medication that calmed Master Leone. The girl began to ask Gordane what else calms Leone down then. Gordane laughed and talked about the guy being reassured by the girl herself. Beatrice said that it couldn't be, but Gordane began to say that it was true, and Master Leone had been reluctant to accept everyone before. But he's much more comfortable now because the girl is here with him. Gordane talks about how it's all thanks to the professor. Beatrice said it wasn't, and Gordane did the best he could. Leone knows that, so he's calmer. Gordane talked about how he didn't think that way, and he only helped a little. After a while, the girl went to Leona's. She was glad that she had barely escaped from the prison of Gordane's compliments. Afterward, the girl suggested to Gordane that he should go and have lunch. Gurdon smiled at the girl and said that since the girl had already eaten, he would go and eat quickly and come back. Gurdon left and told the girl to enjoy her time with Leone. Suddenly, the master opened his eyes, stood up, and called out to the girl. Beatrice began to ask Leone if he was awake. The boy looked at the girl and did not understand what was going on. Beatrice realized that he probably did not understand why the girl was without a bandage. Beatrice was talking about how she had gotten better, and now they could play as much as they wanted. The girl asked the guy about how isn't that great. The guy nodded his head. Suddenly, something happened. The girl opened her eyes and saw a dead man lying on the floor. Beatrice didn't understand what he was doing here, or how he had gotten here. She tried to see him, and realized that he was probably dead. Suddenly the girl heard Leone's voice. Beatrice looked at the master, and saw that he was covered in blood. The guy looked at the girl and called out to her. Then he slowly approached Beatrice. The master called out to the girl and walked towards her. But Beatrice didn't like it, and quickly ran away from the guy. Beatrice yelled at the guy to stand, and not to come near her. Leone didn't understand what was going on, and why the girl was reacting like that. Beatrice was talking about how this was not the Leone she knew. Leone was a predator now. The girl had a feeling that the guy could kill the girl at any moment. Beatrice was very frightened. She shouted at Leone not to come near her. Leone wanted to approach the girl. He called out to her, but Beatrice refused and told him not to come. The guy looked at the girl and told her about the monster. The girl looked at the guy and realized that she seemed to have hurt Leone with her words. Beatrice said something to the guy. Meanwhile, the man who was lying on the floor pulled out a knife and slowly approached the girl. Leone saw this and shouted the girl's name. The girl finally looked back and saw a man with a knife telling the girl to die. Leone didn't let that happen, so he put his back over the girl and hugged her. After a while, the bloody knife fell to the floor. Leone turned to the man, grabbed his head, and the man was gone. Leone looked at the girl and called out to her. The guy was talking about how he was okay and he was fine. The girl began to notice how the guy was getting sick. He was crouching in pain and only called the girl's name. Beatrice shouted to Leona that she would call the doctor right away. The guy didn't let the girl in, but started asking her if she was okay. The girl was telling the guy that he should not worry about her right now, but about himself. Beatrice asked the guy to let her go so she could get a doctor. The girl started asking the guy about how it was all because she was scared of him. The guy just looked at the girl. Beatrice apologized to the guy and told about how she was scared, but everything is fine now. The guy nodded and told the girl about how everything was okay, and then the guy leaned over the girl and covered his face. Beatrice was yelling to the guy about how he was bleeding, and afterward the girl started calling for Gaudain's help. As soon as Gaudain entered the room, he was in a panic and didn't know what to do. The girl talked about how Leone was hurt, so they needed to get a doctor right away. The guy called the girl by her name and then closed his eyes and said nothing more. Angry people said that the guy was a real animal. People said that he was a monster, but Beatrice was not like that. She was interacting with the guy like a human being. She was telling him to get away from these bad people. Leone lay wounded on the bed. Beatrice was in tears and asked the doctor if he was going to get better. The doctor was talking to Trixie about the master recovering soon. Gurdon was talking about how the girl must have been in shock from the sudden attack, so it was something for the girl to go to her room and rest. Beatrice was screaming and asking how she could leave him when the guy was in so much pain. Leone tried to call the girl's name, but he couldn't open his eyes. Beatrice kept talking about the fact that she was here. She was by Leone's side. After a while, everyone tried to forget about it. The castle was quiet, as if nothing had happened 2 days ago. The girl was glad that Leone had recovered very quickly. The boy looked at the insect. The girl looked at it and told the guy about it being a butterfly. The guy repeated the name after the girl and said butterfly again. Suddenly, it started to fly away. Beatrice watched the guy and asked him about catching it. Leone was moving around trying to catch the butterfly. Beatrice was talking about how she realized that Leone was up for catching it, but the guy shouldn't move around so much, as otherwise the guy's wound might reopen. It was the same cute Leone the girl knew, but then Leone was a beast. Beatrice told the boy to wait here so she could bring him another toy. Beatrice thought about the fact that she was helping Leone to change, but at the same time the girl knew the fact that she was too hasty. As much as she wanted to stay with Leone, the girl's uselessness would only be a hindrance. If the girl had been the protagonist of the novel, Beatrice wondered if she could have been happy with Leone. The girl understood the fact that it could not go on like this. After all, Leone is one of the main characters, yet he suffered because of a lowlife like the girl. Beatrice realized that if she stayed with him, she could put him in more danger, so she realized that she had to leave before that happened. The main events of the novel begin in a year, so it is necessary to get everything over with before that. After what happened, the girl realized that she would not interfere in the plot of the novel. Beatrice did not want to become a hindrance for Leone. The girl knew that it was cold and cruel, but she had no other choice. Beatrice apologized to the guy, and tears began to flow down her eyes. Leone called out to the girl and didn't understand why she was crying. The girl was scared of the path she would have to take if she stayed with the guy. Leone sat and looked at the girl. Suddenly Gaudain walked in the door. He started talking about Sir Adler coming back. The boy began to ask Trixie how they were getting along without him. Beatrice began to tell the boy that she thought Sir Adler would be back the day after tomorrow. Adler talked about how he decided to hurry on his way back. Beatrice was telling the boy that she was glad that Perry had returned unharmed. But afterwards, the girl began to ask Adler where Mr. Luton was. Adler began to say that he had also come with him, but he was tired, and so he was resting in the annex. The girl was glad of that. She thought that they must have been in a big hurry to get back so quickly. Adler said that he had heard that something serious had happened while he was away. Beatrice began to apologize and wanted to say that it was her fault. Adler reassured the girl and told her that there was nothing wrong with it. Adler was glad that everything had ended well, considering that the girl and Leon had survived the attack of 15 mercenaries. But Adler said that it could not go on like this. The knight began to call Trixie and Gurdon, and then said that they should prepare to return to the capital. The girl couldn't believe that Adler wanted to return to the capital. In other words, the knight wanted to return to the imperial palace. But at the same time, everyone realized that it would be even more dangerous there. Gordane and the girl were screaming about how they couldn't go there. Adler didn't understand what they were trying to say. Beatrice was talking to the knight about the fact that there were a lot of people in the capital. The girl talked about how she was afraid it might disorient Master Leon. Adler said that they had little time, and it was no longer safe for them to be here, so it would be better if they took Master Leon to the capital. Adler was sure that Leon could handle it, since he had a girlfriend and Mr. Luton now. Afterwards, Adler said that he would go, for he had a lot on his mind. Beatrice stood beside Gurdon and asked him what he thought when they would go to the capital. Gordane spoke of Sir Adler looking impatient, and the lad thought they would go in about a week. Beatrice couldn't believe it. She didn't know what to do. Beatrice didn't know how she could talk Adler out of moving to the capital. She realized that there must be some way. After a while, some thought came to the girl. Beatrice ran after Adler and called out to him. She talked about how she thought Master Leon was in pain. Adler didn't know how that was possible. Adler started asking everyone where Leon was now. Beatrice shouted and told the boy to follow her. After a while, Adler and the girl were already outside. Leon was sitting on the grass and looking into the distance. Adler began to ask the boy where he was hurting, what he was hurting, whether Leon had hurt himself when he jumped out of the window this morning, or whether the foreman was having another nightmare. The girl talked about how she wanted to talk to the guy so many times, but nothing much happened. But Adler kept ignoring the girl. But at the same time, it was worth mentioning Leon, and he immediately responded. Leon didn't answer anything to Adler. Then the knight turned to the girl and started to ask her where exactly Master Leon was hurting. The girl looked into the guy's eyes, telling him mentally to wait a little bit, and then the girl started touching his back. Adler yelled and asked Leon if he was okay. The girl called the master a good boy and talked about how it looked like the guy's wound was still hurting. Adler talked about the fact that the master's wound was quite deep, and it seemed that even his extraordinary healing speed would not help. The girl began to ask Adler if he thought it would be difficult for the master to move in such a condition. The girl hoped it would work, because Adler has no idea how difficult it was to train Leon to pretend to be sick. Beatrice had been talking to Adler about how they needed to postpone moving to the capital. The knight refused to do that and said it was impossible. The girl didn't understand how. Beatrice began to talk about how Leon's wound might open on the road. The master looked at the girl and started making sounds of pain. Adler yelled to Leon and talked about calling a doctor right away. Adler talked about how they only had a couple of days left here. Beatrice understood that the doctor would immediately realize that Leon was faking it. She began to ask Adler if Leon would be able to endure the journey in this condition, because they would be leaving next week. Adler didn't understand how it happened that they had a couple days left. The girl was talking about how Adler was preparing for their departure, and wouldn't they go right away when Adler finished packing? Adler started to tell everyone that he must have been misunderstood because he wasn't going to leave so soon. Beatrice couldn't believe it. Adler answered that Mr. Leon was injured, so it would take them a long time to cover their tracks here, and the mansion in the capital also needed to be prepared. Adler reassured everyone and said that they would still be here for about 3 months. Beatrice realized what that meant. She didn't need to teach Leon to pretend to be sick at all. Adler was talking about taking Master Leon to a doctor anyway. Beatrice began to ask the boy if he was in a lot of pain. The girl realized that the guy didn't need to pretend anymore. Adler began to ask about Master Leon suddenly feeling better. The master smiled and said nothing. Beatrice began to say that it seemed that seeing Adler made the master feel better. The knight again could not believe it. Beatrice said that he did, because the guy had been very busy lately, which was why Beatrice thought they were leaving very soon. Adler started talking about how even if they weren't going anywhere, they still had plenty of work to do. The guy talked about how they still needed to investigate the attack. Beatrice didn't understand what investigate meant. The guy was saying that they'd been safely hidden in this place for 5 years, but somehow they'd been tracked down. Plus, Adler added, and talked about how the mercenaries attacked as soon as he left. Adler talked about how he needed to know how it happened. Beatrice remembered that the mercenaries had indeed attacked right after Adler left. It's like they were waiting for the moment when Leon had no one to protect him. Adler talked about how it could be a coincidence, but caution is always a good thing. Beatrice began to say that the boy was right, and that no one could know what would happen. Adler had said that since all the fallen were dead, it would take time for their enemies to prepare for the next attack, so they had about a month and a half. The girl didn't understand how it happened, that it would take 3 months to move. Adler talked about how he, Adler Vikingham, is here to protect the girl. Adler talked about how they all need this time to make Master Leona comfortable. Beatrice talked about how she understands. Adler is strong, so he stayed by Leon's side while the girl only thinks about running away. Beatrice tells Adler that she was actually a bit shocked when she heard that they might move to the capital in a week. The girl was glad it would take 3 months. Adler was talking about how if their enemies were as fast as Adler, they might have a problem. Beatrice talked to the guy about how that was impossible and no one could be as fast as Adler. Beatrice talked about how everyone says the guy is the best knight in the Empire. Adler smiled and talked about how that was true. Adler began to tell the girl that he would leave the girl to check Master Leon's health and then report back to the guy. The girl spoke of how she understood and would do everything. Adler began to add and said that Mr. Luton said he was willing to start Master Leon's training if that was okay with him. Adler told the girl to discuss it with Mr. Luton tomorrow, and afterward Adler started telling the girl that he was going to go. After a while, the knight was walking and the girl called out to the guy and told him to let this cute puppy go to the girl. Beatrice praised the guy and told him that he did a great job and he was a good boy. Leon asked the girl if Trixie was happy. Beatrice smiled and said that she was very happy. And afterward the girl told the boy about the fact that now he has a teacher and he will teach Leon many things. Teach her how to talk better, how to have power, and many more things. Leon started calling the girl his teacher. The girl realized that if you think about it, Gurdon also called the girl professor. The girl talked about how since Leon was already used to teaching, he thought it would be easier for him to get used to Benjamin. Beatrice told the boy that he would have a different teacher now, a better one. The boy didn't want to learn and called the girl by her name. Beatrice began to talk about the master not worrying. Beatrice talked about Leon not being afraid, for Mr. Luton was a very good man. The girl talked about how, if she understood correctly, in the short story, Benjamin looked like a very unremarkable man. So until Layla found him, no one knew how capable he was. Based on that, the girl imagined him to be kind and polite. Luton walked into the office and asked if it was him. Beatrice looked at this teacher and realized one thing: the fact that he seems to be the exact opposite of what the girl imagined. Benjamin asked about the fact that the guy is always undressed. Adler talked about how they had only recently tamed him to wear pants, and it would take some time to get him used to wearing a shirt. Adler talked about how he would probably feel constrained in her. The girl looked at this teacher. She couldn't believe that this was really a great short story teacher. He seemed cold to Beatrice, but the girl understood the fact that Luton knew what he was doing, and he also seemed rather hostile. Beatrice had told the teacher about being a little wary of strangers. Benjamin thought for a moment and replied about how he wouldn't say that. Adler talked to Luton about how he would be safer if the teacher put on protection. Luton talked about how he didn't need to. Luton talked about how he was hired to teach this young master the etiquette of the nobles. Hence, Master Luton must be an example. The guy talked about how they would now start with a performance. Beatrice talked about how he was really good. The girl talked about how she was scared to death when she first met him. The girl was telling the teacher that she was going to calm Leon down, and the teacher would start to slowly approach her. Luton spoke about how he understood, and they could start. Beatrice walked over to the guy and started telling him about this man, Leon's new teacher. Leone asked the girl if he was a teacher. The girl said yes, and said about his name being Benjamin Luton, and the guy could call him Luton. Suddenly Leone got angry and told the girl no. Beatrice did not understand what no meant. The master started talking and calling the teacher different words. Leone called the teacher a monster, a beast, a spy. The girl asked Leone about not liking him because he was a stranger. Beatrice told the boy not to worry, for Luton was a good man too. The guy called the girl by her name and afterward pulled her to him. Dione hugged the girl and told her that he hated the teacher. Adler started asking the girl if he could come over to them. Beatrice stood in Leone's arms and told the guy to stay back and wait a minute. The girl couldn't understand why she was so hot, just or because Leone had a high body temperature. Beatrice started asking the guy what was wrong. Beatrice didn't know what was going on, because the guy usually let a girl go when she asked him to. Beatrice told the guy that she didn't like being held like this, forcibly. The girl talked about how they should talk while facing each other, and afterward Beatrice asked Leone if he understood. After a while, the guy let the girl go. The girl wanted to get up and leave, but the guy decided to call her again. Beatrice didn't understand what he was going to do this time. The expression on the boy's face was anxious. The girl decided to ask him why he was like that. Beatrice realized that the guy wanted the girl to look at him and realize how worried he was. The girl started asking the guy why he was restless and what was wrong with him. Leone was telling the girl that he didn't like the teacher. Beatrice started asking Leone about why he doesn't like the teacher, because he makes the guy feel uneasy. Or maybe because he's a man. Beatrice realized that the boy must have a reason why he didn't like Benjamin. There had to be a reason why he continued to look at Benjamin and the girl with apprehension. Beatrice began to ask the guy about his fear that the girl might leave. The boy didn't answer anything. The girl realized that Leone probably didn't understand her. Afterwards, Beatrice decided to show the guy that she could leave. Beatrice realized that that was why the boy was afraid. It was something he didn't like. Leone nodded and talked about how that was the case. The girl began to tell Leone that she was not going anywhere and would stay here, next to the guy. Leone smiled and told the girl okay. The girl noticed that Leone's heart was beating very fast, and that must be an indication that the guy is feeling better. When Leone hugs the girl, Beatrice slowly starts to feel a little better. Afterward, the girl told Leon well and suggested he go to school. The boy smiled and nodded his head. The girl understood that she needed to get him used to wearing clothes as soon as possible. Beatrice talked about how since he was shirtless all the time, it was always a little awkward for him to touch his bare chest. The girl started asking the teacher if he could come over to them. After a while, Luton walked over to Leon. Beatrice was telling the guy that they had to reintroduce themselves. The girl told the boy that this was the boy's teacher, Mr. Luton, and he would teach the master, and then the girl said to repeat after her. Beatrice said the name Mr. Luton. To the teacher, Mr. Luton. Leone said pretty much the same thing. Beatrice began to ask the boy about whether he would continue to refuse to call him by his proper name, as he had then, with Adler. The girl talked about how she knew he was a teacher, but it was polite to address him by his last name. The teacher began to say that everything was fine and all was well. The teacher said hello to Leone and then made a bow. The teacher started talking about how he was Benjamin from the Luton family. Beatrice looked at the boy and told him that he should also greet back. Leone nodded and said the teacher's name. After a little thought, Beatrice realized that she had never taught the boy how to greet people properly. The girl apologized to the teacher and said that she had not taught Leone how to greet people properly. Beatrice was telling the teacher that Leone was very smart, so she was sure he would learn it quickly. The teacher started to ask the girl if her name was Trixie. Beatrice said that was her name. The teacher asked about the fact that Mr. Leone was not able to speak at all in the beginning. The girl talked about the fact that Leone could say some swear words, and the girl also talked about the fact that he knew that these words had a negative meaning. Luton began to ask the girl about the fact that she was then the one who taught him names and words like Ugu and teacher. Beatrice talked about how she wouldn't say she had taught him. The girl talked about how Mr. Leone just picked up those words naturally, while the girl was trying to talk to him. The teacher talked about how he was very interested in this method of teaching. Beatrice couldn't believe that he was really interested in her mediocre learning. The girl talked about how this man was full of surprises. Beatrice talked about how it can hardly be called a teaching method, because there is nothing special about it, to be honest. The teacher talked about how he disagrees, and it is quite unusual. The teacher was telling Trixie that modern society still lacked a proper system for educating children. The teacher always thought it was unreasonable. After all, children should have their own special way of learning. What the girl noticed was that all the people here seemed to be obsessed with something. Adler and Gordain are obsessed with Leone, and this guy is probably obsessed with education, and as for the girl herself, Beatrice is obsessed with the idea of running away and having a good life. The girl thought, and then said something about how it was technically more of a desperate need than an obsession. The girl began to notice something, that the teacher began to move closer and closer to her. Beatrice didn't understand why the teacher was so close. Because of this, Leone began to chew on the girl's dress. The girl couldn't understand why she was being squeezed by these two. Beatrice began to ask if it would be okay if she joined them during lessons. After all, Leone gets worried when the girl moves away from him. The teacher talked about how everything would be fine, and besides, teaching him noble etiquette was not a priority right now. The teacher began to talk about how he needs to work on getting closer to him for now. Beatrice was glad that the teacher was already thinking of ways to make his student feel more comfortable. The girl was talking about how he was truly a born teacher. Beatrice was glad that they had hired such an excellent teacher for Leone. Meanwhile, the guy wouldn't let go of the girl's dress and was still angry. The girl couldn't understand why he was angry, because he had no reason to be so angry. The girl began to ask the boy why he was growling at Mr. Luton. The guy wanted to say something to the girl, but Beatrice interrupted the guy. The girl was telling the guy about how he shouldn't do that to him. The teacher said that everything was fine, and the man knew why Leone was angry with the teacher. And afterwards, Luton asked the girl about Mr. Leone, always crawling on the ground like that. The girl waved her head and told the boy yes. The teacher said about then dedicating their first lesson to getting the guy to sit in a chair. After all, Leone needs to sit down properly if he wants to learn the basic dialect and other lessons. The girl realised that at this rate, Leone might attack Luton. The girl asked Mr. Leone to wait, but the teacher did not wait for the girl, but went up to the guy and started saying something in his ear about the future with the girl. From that moment, the boy was silent and didn't say anything else, much less get angry. Afterward, the teacher sat smiling and talking about how everything was great now. Mr. Luton was talking to the boy about how from now on, when he is in the room, he has to sit in a chair. Mr. Luton talked about how it might be difficult at first, but the teacher talked about how they would work on it together step by step. Leone got to his feet and then looked at the teacher. Beatrice thought about how the guy might attack the teacher, but instead the guy walked over to the chair and sat on it. Beatrice couldn't believe it. Adler was also shocked to see Mr. Leon sitting on the chair. The girl started to ask the teacher how he made him do it. Luton told the girl that it was simple, and it was only possible because Trixie was here. The girl could not understand anything. The teacher began to tell the girl that Mr. Leone did not take his eyes off the girl. Beatrice began to say that it was because she was his guardian. The teacher was telling the girl what it meant that the girl really thought of herself that way. Beatrice didn't understand what the teacher meant. After a while, the teacher had lessons with Leon. Luton was telling the boy that he needed to sit down properly. Meanwhile, the guy was growling, getting angry and not wanting to do anything. The teacher started telling Leona that it wouldn't work, and if the boy continued to refuse to sit properly or attack the teacher, then in the end, it's just going to be the guy losing. A week went by. Benjamin was sure he had a firm resolve. Most would be frightened by Leone's wilderness, but the teacher didn't even blink an eye. The girl talked about being glad that no matter how much Leone growled and snapped at her, at least he doesn't attack Benjamin. The teacher began to ask for the girl's help. Luton talked about how it would be better if Mr. Leone listened to him even when Beatrice wasn't here. But the teacher realised that it was too early to expect that from Leone. The teacher asked the girl to wait, to come over to him and sit down. Luton said that since the girl was an example to the boy, she should sit down as properly as possible. Beatrice agreed and said she would do it now. The girl sat down and the teacher tells her that he's going to adjust her posture a little. The teacher asks the girl to relax and straighten her shoulders. A girl asked Luton if she was sitting right. The teacher said she wasn't sitting right, and afterward Luton decided to show the girl what would happen if she wasn't sitting right. The teacher approached Leona, but he growled and didn't want to do anything. The teacher was telling the girl that this is why the girl had to sit properly when the girl asked him to. Beatrice started to ask Leon for forgiveness. The girl was talking about how he didn't have to worry, and Mr. Luton wasn't a bad person. The girl was telling the master that he was just trying to help them. Beatrice was telling the master that she was fine. Suddenly, Leon started saying the word monster again. The master was telling the boy that he could choose his words if he didn't want Luton to do it again. The teacher told the girl to follow his instructions next time. Leon was still yelling and not listening to the teacher. The girl told Leon to stop it, because Mr. Luton is a good man, and Leon should stop acting like that. The teacher was telling the girl that he was fine, and Mr. Leon was pretty smart. Luton had said that as soon as the boy realized what was going on, he would lead. The maid thought about Luton's words about the man's rebellious phase. After a brief moment of thought, the girl had an unexpected idea. She had heard that dogs tended to repeat something when it looked better, so she took Luton's hand and pulled him to sit at the nearest chair. The blonde man was still dissatisfied, while the girl praised the beautiful upholstery of the furniture, saying that it was very comfortable to sit on. The man gathered his thoughts and sat down on a nearby chair. The girl immediately cheered up, for she thought he was just imitating them. The maid began to praise her dog, calling him a good and clever boy, but the man was not happy about it, and then he got up angrily and left the living room. The girl thought he was a little upset, because they looked like they were having fun without him. Luton said it looked like the man's pride was hurt in his eyes, and it had something to do with feeling defeated. The maid was surprised that Mr. Luton knew so much. She thought he would be a better teacher to Leon than she could ever be. Luton modestly replied that Trixie knew much more about Mr. Leon than he did after all. According to him, he's kind of cheating here, because Leon should learn not to divide actions into good and bad, and he should experience more complex emotions and expand his thoughts. Fortunately, Mr. Leon seems to already have a variety of feelings, so Luton plans to use this to their advantage to make the man think more. The girl thinks these complicated emotions might be related to his injury, so she worries whether Luton's method might cause him to trigger the man's injury. Luton begins to assure her that, for one thing, he knows nothing about Leon's injury or his past. The man began to explain that the emotions Mr. Leon was going through at the moment could in no way relate to his old trauma. The girl should soon realize what the man was really feeling anyway. Luton says that he can't be nice to Leon anyway, since its role is to amplify his emotions, though of course he didn't intend to be cruel to him. If the girl is going to pursue Leon, she should leave him alone for now, as he needs time to organize his thoughts. The maid asks, since Luton said he can't be kind to Leon, she could take on that role, for if she was strict with him, he might feel lonely. Luton agreed with the girl's thoughts, saying that she should go after Leon, and he, with her permission, would go to prepare for tomorrow's lesson. After seeing Luton off, the girl ran out into the yard to the blonde man sitting sadly under a tree. She asked him about his condition, saying that she knew he'd had a lot on his mind in the last few days, and apologized if it scared him. The man takes Trixie's hand and tells her not to worry. The man starts to say that he likes Trixie, to which Trixie embarrassedly replies that she likes him too. Upon entering the house, Blondin immediately began to remember everything that had happened today, whereupon he straightened his back and sat gracefully in a chair at the dining table. Leon recalled Luton's words that if he became a normal person, Trixie would like him even more. The next day, one of the warriors came in with a report, telling Adler that the enemies were having some difficulty after losing all their mercenaries. The man wasn't surprised by this turn of events, thinking it was just a coincidence that the assassins had ambushed him while he was away. Grand Duke Evans was not so careless as to send assassins on a mere whim. It made more sense to assume that someone had acted too brazenly to please him. Given all the data, Adler couldn't understand how they knew he wasn't here. After thinking about the situation a bit, the man came to the conclusion that Trixie was a possible mole on their estate. On the other hand, it was impossible, for they found nothing suspicious in her or in Benjamin, whom she recommended. Besides, if she was really working for the Grand Duke, she would not have helped Leon. Ultimately, Evan was the one with the most to lose from Leone acting like a civilized person. Adler thought it was unlikely that either of those two were spies, in which case there had to be someone else. He couldn't believe that among the men who had sworn allegiance for the last half a decade, someone could be a spy. The knight reported that the assassins were all unmarked and had no personal belongings with them. Adler said that was to be expected if they were sent by one of the Grand Duke's subjects after all. They had managed to hide for the last 5 years, but it was only a matter of time before they would fully reveal the place. Adler thought, since there is a limit from the defense, it would be the best strategy for the bottom to go on the offensive first. The man gives orders to find everyone under Grand Duke Evan's command and bring him a complete list of their names. The knight promised to fulfill everything as soon as possible and headed for the exit of the room. Before the knight left, Adler asked him to keep an eye on Trixie, that is, Beatrice's husband Giuseppe, for he had heard that she had a very unseemly way of keeping her mouth shut. They didn't know how much the Grand Duke already knew, but he could turn to his husband for information. Also, Adler had ordered to go through the records of all the servants in this manor and see if there was anyone among them who might be a traitor. It didn't matter if they didn't say anything themselves, because Adler had to find them at any cost. In the next lesson, Luton concluded that they should start dressing Leon a little more decently, since he was wearing old rags. Luton was sure that with the shirt on, the man would have a lot less injuries, bruises and cuts visible. The girl doubted that Leon would like the idea, because last time he had behaved like a yard dog. The teacher said that this was very important, because if Leon was uncomfortable in his clothes, his movements would be restricted. Leon stood up and hugged the girl, to which Luton responded with displeasure, because he told him to stay in a sitting position for 30 minutes. The blonde man clutched the girl in his arms and said that she was unwilling to comply with his terms. Luton asked Trixie to leave the room for a while, because he thought it would be better for them to teach Leon alone. The problem was that the man kept getting distracted, and what's more, it was time for him to set a goal. Luton once again repeated the words about the need for a goal, saying that when the girl left the room, she would immediately realise what it was all about. Trixie took the blonde man's hands and asked him to be a good boy in private with Mr. Luton, to which she received a negative response. The maid thought she had spoiled Leon too much with her attention. She asked Luton not to be too hard on him, because he was still very unstable and he could get hurt. The teacher assured the girl that the blonde would not hurt him, after which the girl said goodbye to Leon and went to the other room. She thought that Leona would have to get used to her absence if she was going to leave this place one day. The girl tried to reason that this training was for the day she would actually have to leave Leona, and at first it was fine. But now she realised she had no idea what she was supposed to do. Trixie assures herself that it was to be expected, since her job was to stay with Leon all day. The girl then went with her report to Mr. Adler, saying that Luton wished to have his lesson with Leon alone. Adler felt no uneasiness about leaving Luton alone with the blonde man. Luton seemed like an excellent teacher to the man, and he doesn't think the teacher will take Leon that far, so there's no problem with his reliability right now. The girl became indignant that the first question Adler asked her was whether she was a murderer, to which the man replied that he had long ago studied her biography and could trust her. Adler says she was promised a reward for working with him. The same goes for Benjamin, and maybe he needs the reward more than she needs hers. Besides that, he was also interested in how the teacher knew about Benjamin, for it was curious enough that someone knew about a man who lived far beyond the borders of his country. The girl embarrassedly replied that educators were usually in a tight circle among themselves, whereupon she stood up and headed for the exit. Adler stopped her, saying that if she knew or suspected something, it would be better to tell him now, because there's no telling how information can slip and travel from one place to another. Trixie asked why he was telling her that, to which she immediately got the answer that it was just a precaution. He was just wondering if anyone else knew she worked here besides her husband and relatives. The girl realised that Adler was suspicious of her and said that she understood what the conversation was about, but after being chased out of Giuseppe's house, Jamie was the only person she knew. The girl was talking about how she'd learned about the job from him just hours before she got here. Beatrice highly doubted that Jamie even knew who was here. Besides, Beatrice didn't realise what information she could have passed on to the man who told her to get some rest. Adler apologized to the girl for making her talk about something so heavy. Beatrice smiled at the guy and talked about how everything was fine. Adler talked to the girl about trusting her for now. The girl was sure that Adler had a lot of worries, so it was not worth staying with him. Beatrice said that she had to go, and then the girl went to the exit. The girl stood next to the teacher and talked to him about something. Luton was telling the girl about how the girl shouldn't be today. Beatrice was telling the teacher that it had been a week since she last saw Mr. Leone. Luton was telling the girl that it was all for his speedy education. Beatrice spoke of how she had not seen a single strand of Leone's hair for a week. The girl had heard that he had already had his bandages removed. Beatrice was afraid that something might have happened to the boy. The girl talked about the fact that of course she was going to practice being separated from him, but it was too much. Beatrice talked about the fact that Benjamin's condition was wiggling, so the girl assumes that Leone didn't go crazy. The girl talked about how the guy was probably doing just fine without her. Beatrice understood that this must have been great news, but she felt a little upset. Beatrice didn't understand what she should do. The girl thought about keeping herself busy cleaning, but she immediately remembered what Adler had told her not to bother, because they would be leaving here soon, and Beatrice had been cleaning like crazy all this week, not to mention yesterday. Yesterday was when Adler told her off for sneaking around in Leone's room. The girl decided that she should go to her room now and take a nap. Beatrice walked to her room and heard the girls standing in her way. They asked about the fact that he was not a dangerous man. Another girl said that no one knew that and she would never expect Mr. Leone to be treated like that. Beatrice began to wonder what had happened to Mr. Leone. Beatrice walked up to the girls and started asking them what they were talking about. The girls looked at the girl and talked about how they were just looking for her. The girl told Beatrice that she had heard some very bad news. She had heard of Mr. Leone's new guardian keeping him in confinement. The girl spoke of Tom shifting logs when he heard a sound from the window. The lad looked out and saw Leone bound. Beatrice could not believe it in any way. She did not believe that Leone was bound. The girl was asking Beatrice about something she didn't know either. The girl told herself that it was not true, and Beatrice should stay calm. The girl didn't understand why she was feeling restless. One of the girls started talking about how Tom always says strange things, so it's not worth paying attention to him. The other girl talked about how it was true, and last time Tom had claimed to have seen a girl as small as Trixie trying to do something special with Mr. Leone. Beatrice didn't understand in what sense something special. The girl talked about Tom supposedly seeing a girl crawling on all fours and talking to Mr. Leone in the street. The maids talked about how ridiculous it was. Beatrice realized what Tom had seen correctly. Beatrice decided to laugh and told the girls that it was an outrageous joke, but just in case, Beatrice decided that she would still go and check it out. After a while, the girl was already running off to Leona's house. The girl realized that she had to see it all with her own eyes. Beatrice had said that Benjamin always kept the door locked during lessons, so going straight there was out of the question. The girl ran into Mr. Adler and said that she needed a key. Adler began to ask the girl what had happened this time and why she needed the key. Beatrice did not know how to explain all that she had heard to Mr. Adler. The girl made up her mind and told the boy that it seems that Mr. Luton had forcibly tied up Mr. Leone. Beatrice said that the servants had said so, so the girl must hurry and check. The girl began to ask Mr. Adler for the key. The knight approached the girl and began to tell her that it was not necessary. Mr. Adler said that he believed him because he was so desperate. Beatrice ran after Adler and said that the servants might have made a mistake. The girl began to ask the boy to calm down, but nothing helped Adler anymore. Adler went to the door and began to break it down. Luton opened the door and started asking Adler what was wrong and why they were breaking in on him like that. Adler didn't say anything, but only yelled at Leone and asked him if he was okay. Beatrice hoped it wasn't true, and Leone wasn't tied up. The girl began to ask Mr. Adler what was wrong and what was going on there in general. Entering the office, the girl saw Leone sitting on a chair wearing a shirt and pants. Luton started asking everyone what was going on in there. The girl began to tell the teacher that all the people were saying that the teacher had tied up Mr. Leone. The teacher could not believe it. The girl began to say that judging from the teacher's reaction, they were just mistaken. The teacher talked about how he would never do that. Luton replied that he had taught Mr. Leone to put his shirt on by himself, since he was not yet used to such a thing and had gotten tangled up in it. Luton talked about how he purposely chose worn-out clothes, but the guy ripped a couple of them. The teacher talked about how he believes when he got tangled up in the rye shirt, it could have looked like the guy was being held down. The girl was talking about how she thought Tom was really the kind of person who states things as he saw them. Besides, Benjamin is just great, since he already made Leon put his shirt on. Leon sat on a chair and looked at the girl. Beatrice did not understand why the master was looking at the girl like that. Suddenly, the boy started calling for the master. Luton asked the master what he wanted. Leon spoke the word to leave. Beatrice understood what the word was, and she had never taught such a thing. The teacher was telling Mr. Leon that he had to leave through the door. Suddenly the boy began to tell the teacher about the promise. The teacher told Leon that he remembered the promise. Beatrice was curious to know where Leon was going. Luton began to say that perhaps Mr. Leon was going through puberty. The teacher talked about how the guy gets very stressed when a lot of people gather around Leon. Beatrice couldn't believe that he was under a lot of stress. Adler was hazy. He asked the girl if she had seen the guy. Adler was amazed by Greece and the boy's beauty. Adler spoke of this being his one and only master. The knight spoke of Leon being divine. Adler talked about how this is exactly how his master should be. Adler spoke of how he wept at his aura of confidence. The knight couldn't believe that he could now wear the shirt. Beatrice didn't understand Adler. She thought about how he should be focused on Leon's strange behavior. The girl talked about how Leon was blatantly avoiding them. The teacher talked about how he had always hated Adler, so maybe he didn't do that because of him. Beatrice realized what that meant. Leon was trying to avoid her. Beatrice could not believe that Leon now hated the girl. Night came on. Beatrice lay on her bed and thought about tonight's incident. Beatrice talked about how Leon was definitely avoiding her. Beatrice talked about how if Leon was able to separate from the girl, it meant that he was learning to be social, and his fear of separation was lessening. In other words, now Beatrice would not have to worry about Leon when the girl left the estate. Still, the girl didn't understand why she was so upset. Beatrice thought about the promise. She didn't understand what Leon meant by the word promise. Was it a promise to Benjamin to avoid Beatrice? Because Leon doesn't want to see her anymore, yet Beatrice talked about how Leon isn't shy about showing when she hates something or someone. Beatrice talked about how she felt like she didn't know the guy at all. The girl was talking about how it was all true, and she would gain nothing by thinking about it on her own. Beatrice realized that she must go directly to Leon and find out why he was avoiding her. Night had fallen. The girl walked through the castle towards Leona. She talked about how Beatrice had come here once before. Then Adler had caught the girl at once. But since he had been very busy in his office lately, Beatrice was confident that it wouldn't happen this time. Not to mention that the girl had the key to the main house today. Adler had given it to the girl before she left, but thankfully the girl started talking about how she hadn't returned it. Beatrice was talking about how she was just going to see if Leona was avoiding her, if he hated her. The girl walked up to the door and took out the key and started to open the door. The girl talked about how she had to carefully continue walking to Leona's room. Beatrice decided to walk slowly. After a while, the girl saw Adler in the distance. The guy was walking around the castle with a candle. The girl did not know what to do, because Adler already suspects her. The girl realized that if the guy caught her here again now, she would probably kick her out of the place. Beatrice was talking about how Adler would definitely find her. Suddenly, at some point, the word "damn night" was heard around the hall. Leon stood behind Adler and looked at the night. Adler was telling the guy about how it was already pretty hard, and whether the guy had something wrong. Leon was telling Adler the word out. Adler was smiling and talking about how the guy was out for a walk. Leon began to tell Adler not to worry. The knight talked about how he, of course, understood everything. Beatrice didn't understand when Leon learned the phrase, "don't worry." Afterward, Leon talked about Adler coming back. Adler told the guy sure, and afterward suggested enjoying the walk. Beatrice talked about how it looked like Adler was leaving. Beatrice was curious to know if Leon had seen her. The girl was sure that the boy would be surprised too, if Beatrice showed herself now. The girl realized that she could not be noisy, since if there was any noise, Adler would be out again. The girl decided that she should go back to her room. But suddenly at some point, Leon came up to her and called her by name, and then held out his hand to her. The girl took the guy's hand, and after a while, Beatrice was already in his arms. Leone carried the girl to the street and then put her on a bench. Beatrice thanked the guy for that, but suddenly Leone began to walk away. The girl started to ask the guy to wait. Beatrice was telling Leon that she wanted to ask him something. The girl started asking the guy about hating the girl. The master turned to Beatrice and talked about how he liked Trixie. Then the girl started asking the guy about why he was avoiding her. Leone started telling the girl that he was not good enough yet. Beatrice started asking the guy about what he was talking about. After all, the boy's speech had improved in just a week. Beatrice told the boy that it was amazing that Leone was learning so fast. The girl called the master a genius. Meanwhile, Leone was talking about how the teacher was not good enough. Beatrice began to ask the lad about Mr. Luton saying those words to the lad. Leone refused and said no. Then the girl began to ask the lad, and to say that it meant that he himself thought so. The master nodded to the girl. The master was telling the girl about how he needed to be better. Beatrice listened to all of this, and afterward told the guy about how he didn't need to be perfect. The girl was telling the guy about how he could take his time. Beatrice also added that if it was at all difficult, there was no need to master proper speech at all. The girl didn't understand why Leone was acting like that. Beatrice thought about the fact that Benjamin might have accidentally provoked his injury. Beatrice started to ask the guy about something that might have happened during the lessons. Meanwhile, the guy put his hand on the girl's head and afterwards called out to her. After a while, the guy was heard saying that he felt good. Beatrice asked the boy if he was sure he felt good. Meanwhile, the boy nodded and said nothing. The girl stood and thought that Benjamin would hardly have made such a mistake. But the girl could not understand why Leone thought he was not good enough. Beatrice began to ask the master why he felt that way. Leone wanted something. The girl thought about what the guy wanted and whether Benjamin had convinced Leone to set a goal. Beatrice thought it was great that Leone wanted to become a better person, and afterward the girl said that sounds great, and the girl would be rooting for the guy. Leone nodded and smiled and talked about how much he liked Trixie. Beatrice was very happy that Leone didn't hate her, and afterward the girl told Leone that she liked him too. The girl was talking about being worried over nothing, and it was very apparent that Leona liked the girl. Beatrice sat on the bed and thought about everything that had happened. She understood that everything was right, and Leora wanted to show the girl the best version of himself. Beatrice talked about how it wasn't because the guy hated the girl. It was because he hadn't perfected it enough yet. The girl thought about how it was quite fascinating. Beatrice talked about how she would have to wait patiently, waiting for Leone to be ready to see her. After some long time, everyone was busy moving, as there wasn't much time left for him. Everyone was busy except Beatrice. Some servant girl looked out of the window and suggested Beatrice to have dinner together. The girl agreed and waved her hand. Beatrice talked about how she was very used to being here. The girl was used to life here. She was her own. She had a lot of friends. But it had been a month and a half since she had lived here. The girl was shocked that time always went so fast. After a while, Adler approached the girl. The girl said hello to him and smiled. Adler started talking about how Benjamin is very passionate about teaching Mr. Leone since they are cooped up together. Adler talked about how the girl must be very bored with it. The girl laughed and started talking about how she wasn't bored and how there was so much cleaning going on in the main house all the time. Adler agreed with the girl and said that the place was absolutely filthy. The girl smiled and remained silent. Adler began to ask the girl what she was trying to tell him. Beatrice looked at Adler, and afterward she started talking about how no way. She was just saying that the place would look better if it was cleaned up a bit. Adler got angry about this and told the girl to take her paycheck already. Beatrice didn't understand what kind of paycheck it was. Adler apologized for the delay, and afterward began to talk about how he was very busy. The knight said that as for the bonuses, they would be written down and paid to the girl right after a year of work. Adler asked the girl to check the amount and tell the guy if it was incorrect, and Knight said the monthly statement is in there. The girl liked it and told the guy okay. Beatrice looked at her money. She realized that if it was 10 gold pieces, it meant 300 gold pieces a month. The girl could not believe that she would have to give up such a salary, or Beatrice would have to survive in the imperial palace. The girl didn't care if she died of poverty or was killed. Beatrice was talking about sacrificing a tiny bit of freedom with such success. Something inside the girl told her to stop it. Beatrice talked about how right now she needed to focus on blotting out the history of her marriage and escaping as soon as possible. It was more useful to strike first now, to take the initiative and offer the deal to Adler. Last time he had rewarded the girl very generously for Leone's success. Despite Leone calling him a damn knight, the girl realized something, that then maybe she could convince him to get the girl out of the arms of marriage much sooner. The girl saw Adler chatting with one of the servants. Beatrice started calling Adler and asking what this girl was doing here and what was going on in general. Adler talked about Benjamin asking to set the dinner table, so the guy made sure it was the right size. The girl couldn't understand why Luton wanted a dining table. Adler said that he wanted to teach Leone table manners. Beatrice could not believe that Leone was already going to learn etiquette. Beatrice couldn't believe that Benjamin was learning everything so quickly. Adler talked about how it would take some time before Leone learned how to use the table properly. That said, the guy was still very happy that Mr. Leone was starting to progress so quickly in the class. The girl didn't know what to do, for she had no way to penetrate between these two. The girl talked about how she had to find something she could help Leona with in order to make a deal with Adler. Adler started telling the girl that if she was also heading towards him, they could do it together. Beatrice said fine and followed Adler afterward. The girl wanted to see if she could get anything out of Adler as they walked. The girl talked about how it looks like Adler won't have to worry about Leon anymore. Adler told the girl about how that wasn't true, and they still had a long way to go. Adler talked about how he knew how to communicate with people because he still wasn't used to being around others. And the fact that Leone only eats raw meat is also a valid concern. Adler talked about how he wouldn't get away with it in the capital. Knight said they could give him bones and meat like that, but there could be rumours because of that. Beatrice was happy about it and told the guy to keep spilling out his worries. Adler talked about how he recalled an incident where Tom claimed to have seen Leone crawling on all fours. The girl talked about how she heard it too. Adler told Tom that he was mistaken, and afterward the knight told the girl that he knew when Leone would wean himself off of it. Beatrice talked about how she was sure he would soon get better. Adler talked about how Leone had gotten so much better thanks to the girl and Benjamin, so the knight was insanely grateful to the two. Beatrice began to say that it would not have been possible without the help of everyone here. Adler said something to the girl, and then something interrupted him. Beatrice asked Adler about the fact that he was not forbidden to enter Mr. Leone's house. The girl talked about how she just thought she should track the guy's progress so she would know what a girl would teach him in the future. Adler told the girl that she was right, because Beatrice was the closest to Leone. Then Adler began to tell the girl that he thought it would be useful for Beatrice to check on Leone's progress from time to time. The doors opened, and Gordain rose from his chair. He began to say hello to Adler and Beatrice. The girl said they hadn't seen each other for a long time, and afterward told Leona to button his shirt. The master sat on a chair and looked at the teacher. Luton held up his shoes and talked about how if he was being mean, they would fall behind in the program. Leone saw the girl and afterwards started to call out to her. The teacher looked at the girl with a displeased face. In the meantime, Beatrice began to ask Luton how he was doing. The teacher told the girl that he was fine, and then the teacher started telling the girl that she was not allowed to come here unannounced. Leone wanted to the girl. He stretched his arms and called out to her. Luton didn't like it and told Leona to stop doing that since he had class. Leona didn't like it and started growling at the guy. The teacher told the guy not to growl and to keep his temper in check. Beatrice didn't understand what they should do, go and stop them. But at the same time, the girl realized that she only planned to observe. The teacher began to ask Leone to put on his shirt. The teacher was telling Leone that he had told him that last time too, but if the guy wasn't going to cooperate, he was going to have to say something to Trixie. Luton reached up to button the guy's shirt, but Leone didn't let that happen. And then he started buttoning his shirt himself. The girl couldn't believe it. Adler was shocked that Leone was already on his feet. The master called out to the girl, and Beatrice listened attentively. The guy started telling the girl that he was Leone, and this was Trixie's house. Beatrice was shocked that Leone had just introduced himself. The teacher praised Leone and said that this is how he should introduce himself to others from now on. And afterwards the teacher said that since they said hello, then they should start their lesson. Gurdon went up to the girl and said that he had not seen her for a long time. The girl smiled at Gurdon and said that he had. Beatrice was curious about what today's lesson would be. Luton looked at Leone and talked about how today they would be teaching Mr. Leone how to wear shoes. Beatrice couldn't believe that Leone was already learning about shoes. The girl believed that Benjamin was really keeping up when it came to learning. The teacher gave Leone the shoes and told the boy to try to put them on himself. Leone took the shoes and put them on the floor. The teacher started talking about how the guy needed to put his feet through first. Luton told Leona to start with one foot and take his time. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Trixie telling him that he could do anything. The teacher was telling Leone that he didn't need to be afraid and to start slowly. Leone slowly put his feet into the shoes, but you could see on his face that he didn't like it. Beatrice could see that the boy was being careful with the shoes because he was not familiar with them yet. Beatrice began to approach the boy. She slowly lowered herself to Leone's chair. The master listened to the girl attentively and waited for what the girl had to say. The girl began to ask the guy about whether he didn't like the shoes. Leone disagreed with the girl. Then Beatrice began to talk to the guy about whether he wanted to try to put them on. The girl thought about how she could give the guy a little help. Beatrice talked about how she was glad that the guy wanted to wear them. The girl was telling the guy about how his feet wouldn't hurt so much. Beatrice told the guy to look at his wounds on his legs. Leone made a chuckle. It tickled him. The girl asked him about whether he was ticklish, and afterwards apologized. Beatrice told the guy that first she would show him how to wear her shoes. The girl started to take off her shoes. After a while, the girl was already showing her how to wear it. The boy nodded and told the girl yes. Then Beatrice started to ask Leone if he wanted to try it himself. The girl said that it would be easier if she showed him, and Leone watched. Suddenly, the guy picked up the girl in his arms so that her shoes fell off. Leone put the girl on a chair and reached for the girl's shoes. Beatrice asked the handyman what he was doing. Meanwhile, Leone picked up the girl's shoes. Afterwards, he told the girl that he would do it all by himself. Beatrice asked the guy that he would do it for her. After a while, Leone was already putting the girl's shoes on. Beatrice thanked the guy for that. Adler looked at it all and almost cried. He talked about what a vivid representation of his nobility and chivalry. Adler talked about how he had become such a fine young man. The teacher didn't like it. Luton began to tell Adler that he thought they should go back to their original training system. Adler said that he also agreed, as long as Trixie participated in the lessons. The teacher said okay, and afterward told Trixie to rejoin the class. Beatrice didn't understand what was being said to her. The girl couldn't believe it. The teacher walked up to Leone and told him about Trixie going back to class with her boyfriend. Leone started to call out to the teacher. Then Luton started asking the guy if he was okay with it. Beatrice wondered about whether the guy still thought he wasn't good enough. The girl talked about how, again, she would be leaving soon anyway. Beatrice started talking about how she thought they should respect Mr. Leone's opinion. The teacher talked about how it was his opinion as a professional educator. The teacher was telling the girl about how Mr. Leone needed her for class right now. The girl was telling the teacher that she didn't think the boy liked the idea very much. Adler looked at the girl and talked about how Mr. Leone would never be against the girl. Beatrice did not understand why everyone was like that, because it was obvious that Leone was uncomfortable with the girl. The girl began to talk about how she believed that everything was fine now, so she would leave everything on Mr. Luton now. The teacher thanked the girl, and afterwards Adler had something else to say to Trixie. Adler told the girl that he wanted to talk to Beatrice, so she should go to his office. The girl agreed and followed Adler. Meanwhile, Leone was standing next to the teacher and objected, but Luton was telling the guy that it was for his own good. Beatrice talked about Leone being nice to the girl recently, but it seems he still doesn't want to see the girl. Beatrice talked about how she no longer understood Leone. Adler and the girl were sitting in a room, and then the prince began to tell the girl that he was giving her a vacation. Beatrice didn't understand what kind of vacation. The girl started to ask Adler about the fact that didn't he himself ask the girl to help with Leone's lessons. Adler talked about what he didn't mean now. He's talking about the period before they leave for the capital, about 2.5 months later. The girl started to ask the guy if she could ask why. Adler started telling the girl about something they had to prepare. Prepare if the girl was going to continue to serve Mr. Leone in the capital. The girl said correctly, and it would be absurd for a commoner to serve the crown prince. Adler was saying that of course they could say that Leone had appointed him for the skills of a knight, but if suddenly the crown prince would personally appoint a commoner as his maid. Adler talked about how this would be a great bait for the nobles to condemn Leon. Besides, Leon's enemies would start using this against him himself. And if people found out that Beatrice had disowned her family, it would be bad enough. Adler began to tell the girl that it would be a paid vacation. Beatrice didn't understand what. Then Adler began to ask the girl about what she wanted addition in the form of a bonus. Beatrice couldn't believe that Adler thought the girl was so greedy for money. Later, the girl would talk about how everything was fine. The girl started asking the guy about how long her vacation would be. Adler told the girl that it would be 2 weeks at the most. The girl realized that then she would really have no time left. The girl decided that she must urgently think of something she could teach Leon before then. And afterward, Beatrice told Adler that she had a question. Adler listened to the girl attentively. The girl talked about how she was only making assumptions. The girl asked Adler what would happen if Leon learned to treat strangers normally. It was safe to say that Leon would not attack or growl at people. Adler began to tell the girl that if it was really possible, he couldn't wish for anything more. Beatrice began to talk about how in that case she would do it. Adler asked the girl how this could be understood. Beatrice began to answer that she would help Leona to restrain her hostility and to meet strangers calmly. The girl also talked about doing a face-to-face workout with the guy. Adler started asking the girl about the fact that she could really do that. Beatrice said yes. But Beatrice began to talk about how she had one condition. She would like her marriage history to be eliminated as soon as she succeeds with this training. Adler asks the girl about why she wants this. Beatrice began to talk about how she was terribly worried, knowing that her husband was a very obsessive and persistent man. The girl was afraid that he might be stalking her. Beatrice realized that it was all nonsense, but she had no choice since she wanted to live in safety, even after running away. The girl mentally apologized to Adler. Adler was telling the girl that he completely understood what the girl was getting at, and in general, he wanted to talk to the girl about the subject. More specifically, about the girl's husband, Jamie. Adler asked the girl if he loved her very much. Beatrice didn't understand what kind of ridiculous nonsense this was. The girl began to answer Adler about how he didn't love her at all, and afterward Beatrice asked why the guy was asking. Adler talked about how the man was desperately looking for a girl. Beatrice was realizing something that she really didn't want to eat in the capital now. Adler was telling the girl that he seemed to be using any tactic he could to find the girl. Beatrice couldn't understand why he was going so far. Adler was telling the girl that he had heard that Jamie was visiting the alley where the intelligence guild was located. Beatrice couldn't believe that she was even visiting the intelligence guild. The girl couldn't believe that Jamie was spending money to find the girl. Beatrice wondered why he was doing it, maybe to sell her or make her be a slave. The girl realized that if she wanted to be completely free of him, she needed to destroy her marriage history. Beatrice told Adler that she didn't know exactly what the guy was up to. Beatrice said that her husband was definitely someone who caused a lot of trouble from time to time. So the girl began to ask her boyfriend if he could blot out the history of her marriage as soon as possible. Adler was telling the girl that he understood why the girl was worried, as the man was quite suspicious. But at the same time, Adler did not want the girl to give up the job. Beatrice began to ask the guy about why she would give up such a great job. Adler started asking the girl if she was serious. Beatrice nodded and said that she would never do such a shameless thing. The girl started to ask the guy that did he really think the girl would run away after such a huge request. The girl couldn't say she wanted to leave with Adler looking at her like that. The guy started talking about how he brought it up just in case, and it didn't mean he trusted the girl any less. Adler talked to Beatrice about how he had been very tired lately. Adler told the girl okay, and then suggested that they agree on terms. Beatrice began to ask what those conditions were. Adler was telling the girl that if her training was effective, he would cut out the girl's marriage history at once. Beatrice was very happy about this. She talked about Adler being a very good employer. But afterward, Adler wasn't done and started saying something else. He told the girl that if she violated the 1-year agreement, she would owe 20 million as a fine. Beatrice was shocked by this. She realized that it was a lot more than she would make on this job for the rest of her life. Adler asked the girl if that would be a problem. The girl started to say that it would not be a problem at all, and that she would not break the contract anyway. Beatrice was telling the guy that he had nothing to worry about. The girl apologized for tricking the guy over and over again. Adler agreed with the girl and told her about what she had signed here. The girl signed, and afterward began to ask things that pertained to successful training. Beatrice asked Adler what about Leone being able to go for a walk with a stranger. Adler smiled broadly and told the girl that it would be great, and he was looking forward to it. Beatrice told the guy okay, but she had a lot of thoughts in her head. The girl thought about that 20 million gold. She would just consider it as a debt for her guilt. Besides, the girl realized that if she were to train Leone, she would first need to get close to them again. Leone was sitting on a chair and buttoning his shirt. The teacher stood with Beatrice and talked about how the girl's presence definitely accelerated the boy's progress over the past 2 weeks. Luton said that at this rate, he thought that the girl would be able to start full-time education in the near future. The teacher told the girl that she would have to stay with Mr. Leone even in the capital. The girl began to tell the teacher that she would like that too. Beatrice began to ask the teacher about the fact that wouldn't there be less things to do when they got to the capital. Of course, Beatrice doesn't plan to go to the capital, but she's not going to say that yet. The teacher began to ask the girl about whether she thought so. Beatrice told the teacher that Leona was uncomfortable with her. The girl talked about how Leone had never once approached Beatrice first in the last 2 weeks. The girl talked about the fact that, in fact, they were growing further apart. The teacher began to ask the girl about what she thought Leone was uncomfortable with the girl. Beatrice lowered her gaze and said that it was obvious that Leone was avoiding the girl, and Leone doesn't even try to hide it. The teacher told the girl that he wouldn't say that Leone was avoiding the girl. It was probably because Leone was having a hard time. Beatrice asked him what she meant, and if Leone was having a hard time. The teacher began to tell the girl that he thought that if you looked into his eyes, the girl would immediately understand what he was talking about. Beatrice decided to think about what the teacher was talking about under the pretense of looking him in the eye. The girl looked at the boy and told the teacher that he didn't seem to be very comfortable in his shirt. The teacher talked about how he had not asked the girl to report, but Beatrice was not wrong. Beatrice did not understand what she was supposed to understand. The girl looked at Leone. She talked about how compared to when his chest was just bare, this seemed better. And anyway, the girl hoped Leone would learn to button his shirt soon. The teacher talked about how he was sure that one day Leone would become good at it. Beatrice smiled and talked about how she hoped so. Suddenly, Leon noticed Trixie and started to walk towards her. Beatrice couldn't understand why the guy was approaching her. Usually the guy pretended that the girl was not here. Beatrice could not understand why the guy was approaching her now. Beatrice stood and asked Leone what he said. The guy started to come quite close to the girl, and afterwards he took her in his arms again. Beatrice did not understand what Leone wanted to do. Then the master held Beatrice in his arms and began to call the teacher. Luton asked Leone what he wanted to do. Leone held the girl and told the teacher the word distance. Then the teacher told the boy, of course. Beatrice could not understand what the two were talking about. Leone started to tell the teacher what he had promised. And afterward, Leone started calling Luton a goddamn teacher. Luton started telling the guy that it was his mistake and they could continue. The girl yelled at the boy and told Leone not to say damn to his teacher. Leone didn't say anything to the girl and just stared at her. The master began to tell the boy to go to his room and rest. He should not resort to unreasonable actions right now. The master held the girl in his arms and growled at Luton. The girl started telling the guy that if he was going to continue talking to the teacher now, could he please let the girl go? At some point, Leone started apologizing to the girl. Beatrice told the guy that he didn't need to apologize and he should just let the girl go. And then the girl told Leona to go with her. The master went, but he didn't want to let the girl go. Meanwhile, the teacher looked at all this and afterwards wished the girl a pleasant time. After a while, Leone and the girl were in the street. The guy let the girl go and sat her down on the grass. Beatrice started yelling at the boy and asking him how he could leave in the middle of class and why Benjamin let Leon go and didn't try to stop him. The master was silent and didn't say anything. Leone was telling the girl about the nice weather so he could walk around with Trixie. The girl talked about how she knows that they haven't gone out together in a long time, but it's all because the guy is avoiding the girl. Beatrice started asking the guy about how it's just an excuse, and Leone doesn't want to say anything. Leone says that he doesn't know. Beatrice started asking the guy why he kept arguing with Luton every day. Leone got angry and said he didn't know. Beatrice asked the boy about his exact ability to repeat, "I don't know." Leone started saying it again. Then Beatrice looked at the guy and told him that she knew the guy was only saying it to avoid trouble. The girl really couldn't understand what Leone was thinking. The guy thought for a while and afterwards told the girl that he liked her. Beatrice started to tell the guy that she liked him too, but it didn't mean that they ended the conversation.